Nice to meet
I'm
you.
extremely glad to have you today. You can't imagine what an honor it is for me because you changed my life, but we'll get to that case quite soon in few questions from here. But yeah, welcome to our little podcast talk show for the musicians.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm curious to hear what how that's impacted you and what your story is and everything too. So looking forward to
Tell me in your own words, who is Troy Stetina?
it. Well, okay, nothing like diving into the difficult to answer stuff right up front. So, um, to answer something like that, I mean, I take that as an existential question because I'm interested in philosophy, Eastern, Western, more toward Eastern, frankly, though, if I had to pick. And, philosophy, artistry, science, also, spirituality and comparative religion, all those sorts of things. And so when you ask me that question, I kind of go back to, like, well, it's a question about the human condition, really.
I would like to
And
hear
then
this
my
version
answer,
actually. I would love to hear the philosophical version of it.
okay, well, um, so what I relate to is, not, I'll say what it isn't. And I think that's important because in our culture, our Western culture, what's sort of becoming global culture, is this idea. It's a materialistic mindset, and it's kind of the idea that we are our bodies. And so I'm not my body. I am the awareness in the body. That's what I relate to. And that's not my roles in life. It's not my accomplishments or lack thereof, successes or failures. Um, I relate to the part of mind that is the what we call the watcher or the witness, the part that notices the thoughts, that notices consequences or whatever the choices. Um, and so that's what I connect with, and that's what I relate to. And it really, that's kind of a foundational thing. Most people don't go there, but it's foundational to everything, especially being an artist and a musician. And I go into that in the new course. There's 60 lessons in that course, and for each lesson, it's more than a lesson. Each one's really a musical study. So, as far as the way the news course relates to old courses, like in the old course, I might have a chapter and it would have a study at the end, and there, a dozen or whatever in a method. Well, there's 60 in this method. So, the scope is huge. And at the end of each one of these musical studies, I go into what I read a soliloquy, which is kind of like a short essay about a subject matter relating to the music or the point at this. We're talking about either artistry or things like performance anxiety, which is really an identity issue. All of these kinds of topics come from fundamentally this kind of question of this of who we believe we are and what we believe we are, because that's the story in each of our heads that kind of determines our motivation. It determines what we think we're doing here, everything. So anyway, I guess the long and the short of it is that I just consider myself to be this awareness, and I think that awareness, it's not invested in ego. I don't have a real I think it's transpersonal, frankly, when you get right down to it. And that's kind of my idea of what music is about. It's about connecting all those dots. So I don't know if that's a very complete answer, but at least maybe it.
It was something that I mentioned today earlier, actually. I had a conversation with one of my friend, and I asked him the same question: "Who are you?" And the first thing that he come up, he start saying, he start giving out his name and his career. And I tell him this is what is applied on us. Name is something that is been chosen by our parents, and our career is something that society apply on us. But if you're taking away all these filters and name and musician and who we are, like what is this self
Exactly.
without the career, without the social life, without all of that. So
Yeah,
yeah, I
I
love
think
what.
that we we typically go there because we don't really know any of the deeper answers. And so, you can only go as far as you can go. And our culture teaches us, or Western culture, typically materialistic culture, teaches us that we are our thoughts, we are our personality traits. I don't even think that I'm my personality traits either, because my personality traits are habits of thought, things that I've
Exactly.
practiced doing. And if I can change by choosing to practice a new habit, if I can change, well then obviously that trait isn't me. I'm the quality that can change traits. So I'm not even my personality. Frankly, there's something deeper than that. And so anyway, that's to me is fascinating stuff, and I'm sure as we've talked, we'll probably
I
hit on some of
I
these
love it.
topics. They
I'm
come up
sure it's going
everywhere.
to be an amazing conversation. Tell me, how does a day in your life look like? Your typical day, your habits, the things that you do every day when you wake up.
Well, about the only thing that is consistent is that I spend some time, I walk, I meditate, and I journal. I do some self reflection, and I do that every day because if I don't do that, if I plow into some project, some work, inevitably I wind up kind of feeling at some point frazzled and directionless. I'm not grounded enough.
True.
And so I've figured out that I have to do that in order to achieve that stability. In the Eastern traditions, they talk about your awareness as being like a candle flame, and you don't want the you get hit by this or that circumstance in the day and it throws you off. It's like a wind blowing that candle and it's flickering all over the place, and this instability is a lack of peace. And I do this so that I can sort of keep that candle flame steady
Hmm.
and then ride whatever ups and downs happen, and then nothing really is as bothersome to me. And that's come about as a result of necessity. I think choosing to be a musician or an artist, or it's not a safe career choice. You know, um,
It's very true. It is
and
true.
yeah,
I actually, you mentioned journaling. I started journaling last year, and I wasn't really aware of it. I would do sport, I would do meditation in my own way, but I never tried journaling. There was a company that they offered me an advertisement for journaling book, and I was like, okay, I will just put the advertisement out there. But when they sent me the journal, and I was like, like I'll give it a shot. I'll try to fill it up to see how it works. And it's a guided journal, so it guides you with the questions, with daily
right.
check-ins, with your gratitudes. Um, I can confess that to me right now, it's one of the best uh, self-spending times. It's like
Mhm.
I'm having 1 hour per day before the sleep. I'm gonna put my headphones. I'm gonna do the journal. And during this year, everything that I manifested in my journal, it happened. And it's insane
Awesome.
how it works. Like the power of writing is really crazy.
Yeah, in the evening, my wife and I started this practice where we go through and we specifically identify, okay, we're not going to look at all of the things that went wrong for
Hmm.
this half hour. We look
Right.
at what happened, what are the gratitudes and why. The why I think is important too, and it's because the our brains seem to be wired to pay attention to what's wrong, to what problems need to be fixed, and what's going wrong. And naturally, if you follow that, what ends up happening is your life is consumed by what's wrong, and
Hmm.
that just naturally starts to take over, and it
We're gonna
erodes the
attract
quality of
those
life.
those negativities.
Yeah, so what we have to do is switch and develop the mental habit of being able to see the good in the bad, to see, well, what part of that is useful. And of course, a lot of that gets a lot easier when we stop being so externally focused and you start focusing on,
Hmm.
well, what did I learn from this? Or how did this develop? How is my character changing or being developed? And when we start paying more attention to that, then again, sure, sometimes life throws curveballs at you. You don't get what you want, or whatever. The thing that you really wanted. It used to use the word manifest. I'm not a big fan of that word, but you know, um, if it works, great, and sometimes it doesn't. And if it doesn't,
True.
then if how do you deal with that? So, um, disappointment and all the rest. And managing that, that's an important part. I cover a lot of that in these soliloquies. And it's funny because it's like it started out as a guitar technique book, and then it went into music and self-expression, and then it was like, oh, I need to talk about all these aspects of music that run deeper.
Yes.
And so it turned into like two books in one, sort of fused together. But
I
yeah, we'll
can't
talk about
wait
that.
to read it. It's crazy. I went through your books and I can say I'm excited to see this one. I found that something through the internet. You grew up in a family of Olympic cyclists, where you and your brother won multiple national medals, which is really impressive. And you were youngest of four brothers who are accomplished athletes. How did this competitive environment shape you growing up as a kid in this family?
Well, that's actually something else that's in one of those soliloquies I was writing about. And I think that it taught me about focus and being able to push through unpleasantness to reach something, to reach a goal or something. And in at least in the culture that I'm familiar with around here in America, there are a lot of people that keep talking about the fact that everybody seems impulsive. They want the short term needs met. They don't look long term,
Everyone on the
etc.
surface, a lot.
Yes. And my problem, of course, was exactly the opposite, because we have this bell curve, and even if
Hmm.
the center of the bell curve of most people is this experience in culture, there's still outliers. And apparently, I was one of the outliers on the other side of the equation, which is I
Right.
learned to set my short term aside for the long term. Well, that creates a problem too. And the problem that creates is if we're always setting our short term well being aside, then we move through life trying to create this future in which we can be happy. It's which we can feel satisfied and have the life. We're trying to make our life good by creating the
Right.
future we want. And if you're always not in the present moment, but you're always doing in the present moment for the future, you're making yourself miserable in the present moment. And what's life but a string of present moments? So you keep
Yes.
kicking your happiness
You
into the
miss
future.
all these little joyful moments of spending on
That's
a day
right.
to day life, right?
So I was always very, driven and very, focused on, what was wrong and trying to get there. And there like all of these deeper principles. This is why I like a lot of the Eastern philosophy stuff, because they acknowledge the paradox. And you look at truth is always this tension of opposites, and you're really trying to find the balance point between them. And I don't think that there's a right or a wrong, but there are different balance points, and depending on the point you choose, you're going to get certain consequences, and you get the right to make the choice and create those consequences, and then you get to experience that. That's your life. So you are
Hmm.
the artist. I like the metaphor of each of us being the artist, and the masterpiece we create is our life. through the choices we make. And of course, it's not just the choices, because we aren't dictators of what's going to happen in life. We are co-creators based on our choices and based on what life comes in either opportunities it gives us or hammers us. There's this one of the quotes I like a lot. One of the lyrics came from a Rush album. It keeps coming up in my mind. It was on their Snakes and Arrows album,
Hmm.
and it says, "The tree can only grow the way the wind blows." If the wind's blowing one direction, the tree's going to grow that way. It's got no choice. And it's the same with us. We can only grow in the direction that our opportunities come to us. You know, and for me, certain opportunities came and it kind of dictated a path, and certain opportunities that I tried to create never materialized, despite
Right.
what appeared to be, and what you'd say is, oh, this is like a guarantee. How could this not work? And yet, here we are. It
Wow.
didn't. So anyway, who
Uh,
knows what creates those sorts of things? But
you just, but
it's
what you
our
say, you
job
give
then
me
to sort
so
of
many
roll with it.
flashbacks. You give me so many flashbacks on different situations of my life that exactly something that I was pushing through. I was for 100% sure that, okay, this is the plan. I planned it. I managed it. It's going to happen 100%, no doubt. And then, not that it don't happen, it failed in the worst possible case. But after 2 months, another door opened, something that I didn't plan, something that I would never guess that, okay, this is an option. Like, that was not a considered option. It would just open and it would exactly give me what I wanted, just from, or what I needed, basically, but I wouldn't consider that I need this from absolutely different direction in life. We'll get to that, how my music
Right out of
career
the blue.
changed. It disappeared and then it appeared again. We will get to that. Um, do you remember what is your earliest memory, childhood memory of getting to music? Where you fall in love with music? Was it a certain song? Was it a concert? What made you fall in love with music and want to be a musician as a child?
Um, I don't really know. I do remember music in the house. My mom was a singer,
Hmm.
opera singer actually, and most of what she sang, that kind of stuff, it didn't really spark my enthusiasm. I mean, it was just
Right.
something that I heard. But there were a few pieces, like the really dramatic ones that I'd hear and, play a record or something in classical. And it was like, oh, that's really cool. So my interest in classical music was kind of this tiny subset of it. Like most of it I didn't care about, but some of it really struck me.
Hmm.
Um, my mom tried teaching me some piano when I was young. And I didn't really have great interest in it, but I mean, I could hear the different colors of, major chord to minor chord. I could
Yeah.
identify them. So there was some sort of affinity or ability. And then when it came time to play music, in school, in an elementary school here, we kind of had this system where I think it was like sixth grade, everybody has a music class,
Right.
and and that and of course what I remember was every single boy in the class lined up to play drums. We all wanted to
Oh,
beat on
yes.
things and make noise. So they said, no, no, we can't do that. So then, only these people, everybody else has to choose something different. And I think that at that point, I was more interested in the music class just because it was different. And I was kind of tired of sitting at a desk and
Hmm.
regurgitating, you know, stuff that I wasn't really interested in. And so it seemed more open ended. And it's like, oh, this is kind of new. And anyway, I remember I went home and I said, well, I wanted to play drums, but they wouldn't let me. And then my mom produced this clarinet out of the closet. She said, oh, well, one of your brothers had tried playing a clarinet. This is the instrument we have, and this is what you're going to play. So
Oh.
that made my choice for me. And of course, I had no real interest in that, but still,
Hmm.
the highlight of the day in school, I mean, it's a relative thing. School
Yeah.
is like, okay, it's something you have to do. I show up there and I don't want to. But the music hour was the most
It was the
interesting
fun part
hour
of
of
it.
that day. Yeah, relatively speaking. And at first, it wasn't like a big, aha or anything. It was just like, oh, this is more, I'm looking forward to this part of the day. And of course, on a clarinet, it's like you're squeaking and making all these
Hmm.
awful sounds. And yeah, it takes a while, but because I started with that, it teaches you how to read music, how to make pitch
Right.
and time, and that's kind of fundamental. And that's a thing that a lot of guitar players kind of miss because we don't start with reading music, for the most part. And I kind of am part of the reason for that, I think, because the first methods I did away with music notation because it was not really the key thing. But in any case, yeah, I stayed with that for like 4 years through school. And while I was still in band, I remember thinking, of all the stuff to do, I think I'd like to. I thought maybe I would be a band director or something because that was my experience of
Hmm.
music and it was pretty cool, you know. Um, and I think I'm glad I didn't do that. But I at that point, one of my friends had a bass guitar. I was over at his house, and he says he plays the Iron Man riff, and I'm like, oh yeah, I've heard that. That's kind of cool. And he says, why don't you get a guitar and then we can play? Well, we never did, but I did get the guitar, and I got started. And because I knew how to read music, I could self teach at that
Yeah.
point. I made a lot of
And
mistakes,
what
so
was your
found a way
first
through 'em.
guitar?
It was called Apollo. It was this knockoff of a Strat, just a cheap, barely playable, um, you know, had a whole bunch of switches on it to do lots of different pickups and stuff, so it was
Oh,
it
okay.
was gaudy. But yeah, I remember that. It was a $60 guitar. Well, no, it was a $120 guitar that was on sale at half price. And my mom had my back on music. She wanted me to do music because she's interested in music. And my dad couldn't care less. And he was very against spending any money on anything. So she comes home with this guitar and he's like, what the hell did you buy that for? And she says, well, it was half price. And he goes, what the hell didn't you buy two? He thought it was the stupidest thing ever. But I'm glad she stood up to that and got me started because it was a thing that after I got started, then I started getting into the bands that inspired me. And it was a gradual thing. The better I got, the more fun it became, the more
Hmm.
interested I became. Around that time, I started getting into the first bands, that I was into. And I think Kiss was the first band. It was the first concert I saw was Kiss. I think it was 1977. I was a kid.
Wow.
And it was also the reason I think is because their music was accessible. Like it wasn't
Hmm.
so fast or so complicated. The riffs were simple and I could hear them. So I had my guitar and I played through, Alfred's Book One, playing these three note songs, whatever little melodies
Yes.
and all of a sudden I'm like listening to Kiss. I'm listening to I think it was the song Firehouse was the first song I learned by ear.
Hmm.
Um, or Black Diamond, I don't remember. It was those early albums. And I'm listening to the song and I'm hearing, oh, I can hear the pitches. And I started finding them on the guitar. So then I'm playing the riffs. And then I was off and that um, because there was no tab back then,
Yeah.
the only way you could learn that music was by ear. And that's a thing that 99% of people that learn to play guitar, they want the easy way. So they're going to learn, show me where to put my fingers. And when they
Hmm.
do that, they don't develop their ear. And if you don't develop your ear, you really stunt yourself as a musician. And so, even though it takes 10 times longer to learn music by ear, I tell people if you really want to be good, you want to be a good player, spend the 10 times, develop your ear because It's whether you hear it and you translate it, or whether you hear your own ideas in your head translate it. It's still from your inner ear into the guitar.
Hmm.
And if you don't have that piece, you will never get very far on the instrument. And another big piece of this is that if you don't have that, music theory means nothing. In other words, the value of music theory is only when you connect the theory with the ear training. Then you understand music, you hear music, and you can translate it and you can compose, whether it's in the moment, improvisationally, or it's just,
Hmm.
composing, and creating tracks and whatever. But if you don't have that ear training component and attach it with music theory, a lot of people, what's the point of music theory? It's like, well, if it's just about learning how modes, learning how terminology,
Hmm.
and it means nothing. But if you understand musical structures and you know what they sound like, it means everything. So anyway, I'm getting a little ahead of myself here, I guess.
That's what exactly what I want. To me, actually, I had a similar situation with you, but with the different that the musician person in our family was my father, and
Mm-hmm.
I started playing flamenco guitar when I was 3. He forced me to play flamenco guitar. He didn't want to give me a baby-sized guitar, so I had like a full-size flamenco guitar, trying to like get my hands around it and play it. I played it till I was 6 or 7, and
Wow.
when I was 7, I literally started hating to play flamenco because my mother opened the music store, and the music store that she opened, she had this photo of Randy Rhoads and Slash posters on the showcase, and there was a Black Beauty Gibson Les Paul with 3 golden pickups. I didn't know what it is. I didn't know how it calls, but I say, I want this one. And my father's like, no. So I was insisting that I want this, I want this, I want this. And for my birthday, my father got me a black flamenco guitar, thinking that I will agree on that. And I was like, no. So what happened that I stopped playing
He's
guitar
compromising,
for quite a
sort of.
couple of years. I stopped playing maybe till I was around 12. We migrated. We had this unfortunate case where my father was scammed by his close friends. So he sold everything, like our house, our business, cars, everything, and sent the money to him upfront. So when we migrate there, we already have car and house ready, but he take the money and disappeared. So as a teenager, the migration years was tough. I would work. My parents would work. They would step on their ego, and They started the life from, I would say, uh, below the line of zero. Yeah. But my mother, even though like my we had a comfortable life before the migration, but so my mother and my father both went to work to start building a life from absolute zero because they sold everything they had and then we started from zero. Um, Even though it was tough, my mother called me one day. She was working in a restaurant back. She gave me $200, and she said, "Listen, so this could be like the whole month of the rent. If your father know it, he will kill me. But take it, go pursue your dream. Go get what you want."
Mm.
I remember like I would go to the showcase of the music stores. I would watch like this Gibson Les Pauls and almost having tear in my eyes. I knew like, okay, I could never get them. But I find the Epiphone Les Paul studio used with no strings, with no hard case or even bag, and I was holding it in subway station driving home.
Mm.
Over a year or two, I was practicing with no amplifiers, so it was just like the acoustically. We will get to that point also.
Yeah,
Who is your
got it.
favorite guitarist of the new era from now, this generation, if there is any?
Well, years ago, I kind of stopped. I think we go through phases, and not that everybody progresses through all the phases, but for
Yeah.
me, as I see it, I went through an inspirational phase where technique and tone, just really riveted me. This is
Right.
early on. And then you develop your technique because you mimic, what you hear.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then after a certain point, when you master that, then you kind of go into this artistry phase, I think. And now, not and some people are in the artistry phase right off the bat. I guess there's exceptions or whatever. But for me, I went through the inspired by other people, developed my
Mm-hmm.
technique, and then I started getting more and more interested in, my own artistic voice. And
Right.
I had it early on when it came to lead guitar because, I talk about this too in the new book. I think that what really is happening is that when something sparks your enthusiasm, you hear a tone or you hear something and you say, "Ooh, what's that? I like that." What's happening is that it's a piece of you that is incomplete. It's unrealized, but it's actually what's we say it strikes a chord in you. Well,
Yeah.
the chord is in you, or my inspiration is the chord is in me. So what's happening is what's outside me is a projection of a piece that's actually me wanting to be more of that. You know, I don't know how to do it yet though. So when I go out to it and I learn it, now I take that becomes a tool that I can express that piece of me directly. Instead of having it outside me, I bring it into the inside. And that's the process of developing your artistic voice, in my view.
Mm-hmm.
So, as gosh, I'm losing my train of thought here. Where were we just going with this?
The question
What was the
was
question?
if there is any favorite guitarist from the new era, the
Oh
new
yeah, new
generation
era.
guitarist that you like.
Yeah. So the phases, the reason I brought that up is because, you know, after you do that, then you go into this phase of developing your own artistry. It's
Mm-hmm.
about self-expression. Well, in that point, you're not really caring too much about what's out there. You're more caring about what's in here. What do I have to say? Now, that's not to say in being there, you might still hear something somebody does. Oh, new guitars. That's cool. That spike strikes me. And,
Mm-hmm.
I remember that happened to me even recently where, like, the last EP thing that I did 3 years ago, I think, that started 4 or 5 years ago. Just kind of, I was listening because my wife's was very into Marilyn Manson. I was listening to a couple of those, one of those albums, and there was some
Mm-hmm.
things about that album that struck me as, oh, I like something about that, but not something else about it. So I was like, oh, what if I pulled that piece and then I start to, make that my own.
To do it in your own
That
way.
was kind
Yeah.
of how that thing germinated. So I'll hear that with guitarists, but what bores me is technique, really, because technique is a very analytical thing. And it's
Mm-hmm.
hard to develop technique. It takes a lot of perseverance. It takes a lot of time and struggle. And some people get stuck because there are some ways to do it and some tricks to get there. But and I don't mean to take anything away from how difficult that aspect of guitar is. But once you get the technique and you understand how it works and you make yourself do it, it's pretty dull. And so if I hear a guitarist with good technique who has nothing artistically to say, I get bored in about 15 seconds, you know,
Exactly.
and there's no point in it because the whole point of technique is to enable musical expression, and it's not an end in itself. If it's an end in itself, I'd rather watch a guy at a circus, juggling and standing on,
True.
walking a tightrope. Those are all skills too. Or someone who can type 300 words a minute or whatever, that's basically guitar playing becomes something like that, which
Mm-hmm.
which is fine if that's what inspires you, but that's not what inspires me. It's music. So I don't I don't go out of my way to listen to stuff really. I haven't even played guitar for 9 months, frankly, but which is another story. But um, this has happened to me many times throughout my
We have
life
those
where I'll
phases.
play and then I won't play because that's a function of career and the opportunities or lack thereof.
Yes.
It doesn't make much sense for me to sit and maintain my chops in a room for no reason because if I let them erode, well, I can play a couple weeks, practice. They come back pretty fast, and then I'll
Hmm.
be able to do the thing. But it's not fun to just keep doing the same thing over and over and over. You
Yes.
need to progress. So, as far with that being said, then I can answer the question, which is new players. Sometimes I do hear stuff that I come across, or somebody I teach a few people, not a lot, but somebody will play something for me and I'll hear it and that's pretty cool. Um, and it has to be inventive. It has to be innovative. It has to say something musical. As
Hmm.
far as guitarists that are lauded for their technique, I guess the last guy, then this isn't even really very new. It's going back a number of years. Well, I heard, I don't know, maybe 8, 10 years ago, Guthrie Govan, I heard him play. And I was like,
Right.
oh, there's something about his playing. He has precision, he has technique, but he uses it
Hmm.
for a musical delivery.
Exactly.
And I
Yes.
feel like, oh, I'm interested in that. He holds my interest. Um, he doesn't play all that fast or anything. I mean, he could play fast, but I mean, how fast? Fast is a relative term, you know. And in the scheme of my own technique and what I consider fast, I don't really consider that's not shred fast,
Hmm.
really. I mean, I mean, to a degree. No, I'm not saying what he can or can't. I don't know. I don't know, and nor am I saying that there's value necessarily in how fast someone can play. I even kind of poke fun at that, and I did a couple of ridiculous videos that how stupid that whole thing really is. But
Yeah.
for myself, I have really been inspired at different times in my life by intensity and energy. And speed is a component in energy. So I wanted to be able to do it. Not that I play fast all the time, but I want to be able to do it when
Yeah.
I want to do it. And whether a player has that or not, though, the bottom line is: are they musical, and do they use it, musically? And I'm not very. I haven't been listening to a lot of music, because of just the way life goes sometimes. But anyway,
So
I guess he's the first guy that comes to mind, and he's sort of like, to me, the poster child for that
yes.
principle of musicality.
I completely agree because I was in Guitar Summit and I was like talking to different artists like Jared James and other friends of mine been there, and there is this Italian guitarist who's uh, quite on a hype, super famous now, Matteo Mancuso, if you have heard of him.
I have.
There's a lots of hype around him and lots of videos and lots of interviews. And so someone asked me if I'm going to his show, and I said, with no offense, I was like, no. Even though he's a good guitarist, but I don't hear any music in it. There are artists that I call them Instagram artists or social media guitarists, Cool. I see the technique. I hear you can play fast. Amazing. But I prefer to hear three notes sounding good musically than all this. Yes. For example, Chris Buck is also another guitarist of the new era. I love how he duplicate and mimics the vocal line or the saxophone line on the guitar, and he learned his phrasings from the saxophone, from the vocal. And when I asked him, so how do you practice phrasing? He said, I will just put Sam Smith album and I will just go after his vocal line, and I learned
Play
like the
around.
vocal
Yeah.
techniques on the guitar. And I loved
Yeah.
it. But there are other artists with no offense, like Matteo Mancuso or this guitarist from Polyphia, which I hear the technique, but I don't enjoy listening to it musically. Just exactly the same thing
Mhm.
you said.
Well, it's
Um,
a different,
a
you
question.
know,
Yes.
well, I want to say that uh, you mentioned in the new era, like the social media guitarist. I think that's an
Yeah.
interesting term because it's a different vehicle playing on little snippets of video, because what gets attention is something, either shocking or short, astounding. They're not trying to hold an attention of, can you play a 4 minute solo and hold my interest for 4 minutes? Well, that takes
Yes.
musicality. But if what you want to do is create a burst of, give me
15
a
second for the
20
Instagram.
second presentation
Yes.
of, what looks impressive. Well, that's what the social media platform vaults to, relevant to, into the public awareness. And
Hmm.
so that's basically created a marketplace for that kind of thing. So we shouldn't be surprised that that's what it is. Um, and it's not really music then, and that's why
Exactly.
a non-musical or relatively less musical
Hmm.
guitarist succeeds in that area. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. It is what it is, and that if that's what people want to pay attention to, then that's the economics of our system. Um,
Right.
but the economics of our system have basically destroyed the value of music, which is another kind of
Exactly.
problem for people that are actually musicians. So
This is
anyway,
true.
that kind of touches on another aspect.
Yeah, I also mentioned this little thing. I will just say super short that even on the Guitar Summit, I see like guitarists who now consider as like the top guitarist of this new generation. They confess that they cannot plug and play, like they can't directly connect the guitar to amplifier and play. And when I was one of the only ones who just, okay, I plug my guitar to amp and I don't need anything else. I don't need to set up any plugins and there we had like few artists, which even like non-musicians been surprised that they're like, oh, okay, we cannot play with an amplifier. We need our audio card, our MacBook, and set of plugins, and only then we can play the guitar. I was like,
Yeah.
okay. All right. To this next question, do you have any failed performances, concerts, shows that you remember like clearly? Something that you wasn't fully satisfied. You consider a failure.
Well, there's two questions in that. What do you consider a failure as definition? That's one question. And then when things go wrong. So, yes, um, the first time I played,
Hmm.
the very first, I was in when I was young and I was a teenager, and I was in garage bands, and we finally got this show,
Right.
and it was at a big venue, with a stage that was 6 feet high. And it was kind of overwhelming, this big stage, because I had no experience on that at
Yeah.
all. And what happens on a big stage is everything sounds so different. You know, if you set your amp over here and the drummer's over here, well, if you're standing in the wrong place, you can't
Yeah.
hear what you need to hear. I couldn't hear myself, or I hear myself and I can't hear my cues. Everything
Hmm.
throws you, plus the fact that you're on a stage and all of a sudden, it's kind of like the experience that people have when they first start recording. The red light goes on and their mind goes blank, because it's like, oh my God, I'm recording. The only thing I can think about is don't screw up, don't screw up, don't screw up. So I'm
Yeah.
out there, and all this new experience, and I don't know what I'm doing. I'm stiff and I'm nervous, and I'm even at that point, I was pretty well recognized in my little bubble as being a really good player. So
Hmm.
I had my standard of what I considered to be, this is what I'm capable of. And with all of the flack coming at me, and this felt like a fish out of water, I
Yeah.
played very poorly. And and I remember that very well. And it was a battle. And over the time, I even, and I wrote about this in one of the soliloquies too. My experience at a later time was I had some pretty, better shows. And then I went to this one though later that um, we went out and played. And for a number of reasons, I didn't have time to warm up. And at this point in my
Mm-hmm.
playing, I really needed a good warm up to be able to do what it was that I was trying to do. Because the level
Right.
that I was striving for, this is probably like 1980, 1981, you know. And of course, back then, the music, had a lot of, the lead stuff was tough,
Mm-hmm.
And so I went out and played, and I wasn't happy with it. And I remember coming back, and the band that played after us, these guys were a couple years older than us, and they were good players. And they're getting ready to go on. There's one backstage room, and we're in the room. We just got off stage, and they're in the room. They're going out, and they're all hyped up. And this guy's got all this enthusiasm, and he's
Mm-hmm.
pumped up, and he says, "Hey, how'd it go?" And I'm pissed off, and I say, "Oh, it was crap." I played like crap. And he looked at me and he said, "That's bullshit." He said, "You did what was in you to do, own it." And I was like, I know, I kind of took me back, and I thought about that a lot. And I thought, he's
Mm-hmm.
right. I was saying, and what I wrote about that is that he taught me more about musicianship than about anyone else, just in that interchange, because owning the performance that was in you to do, self acceptance. You got to start where you are, accept what's true. And if you don't like it, then you got to learn how to deal with the situations around you. You got to figure out, what do I need? What do I need to hear? And how can I make sure that I hear what I need to hear?
Mm-hmm.
If I need a warm up, then it's my job to get it. If I need to prepare better, then prepare better. But anyway, yeah, that was a big moment, a big learning moment, and it taught me this thing that has been going on ever since. Live performance is never perfect, and I mean, I've had a few where everything felt just right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And it's amazing when that happens. But 99% of the time, you are in a substandard situation where you
Something
can't
is
hear what
wrong.
you need to hear, and you hear too much of something. And part of that's, I've noticed too, like I need tone to really be the right tone to inspire me. If I'm playing in my guitar tone, if I have like too much brashness and irritation in the tone, then I feel like I'm pushing away. I can't play well, you know. Um, so it's up to me to understand the world of tone and reflected sound and how much direct sound I need and how to control that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so it's as we as we learn, then we can learn how to control a lot of these aspects better, and then we do better. So I mean that's kind of my experience of the trial by fire of jumping in at the beginning. I
Mm-hmm.
also to go all the way back to that first one, the first performance that threw me so much. It was so terrible. Um, it was such a letdown, because I had such high hopes. This is really what I wanted to do, and after I did it, I remember, thinking this how could I have failed so badly at this? Well, the only real failure is to not learn something. If you learn something from it, you can do better next time. And if you take that approach with you, then you're gonna be on the upward spiral. Um, that first show just
Mm-hmm.
it kind of uh, it's it really shook me, to the core. But it didn't derail me totally because I knew that I just needed another chance. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so anyway, that's kind of the story.
I will tell you my experience how it went. Um, with what I considered a failure, but apparently it wasn't a failure. It was actually what led to success after that. So the same story that I told you about my first electric guitar. I used to practice at home with no amplifiers, with nothing, by the ear. I would put some records on. I'll try to like replicate what's on the record and play. I looked like a rock star, but I really wasn't. But I was like the long hair and like the leather pants and whatever, like the bracelets. And
Yeah, you got to
so
suit up.
one day I got invited by this local band to play. And I was like, sure, yeah, okay, let's go. They were like, we're playing a gig. You want to join us? I'm like, of course, okay. And till that day, I never plugged my guitar to an actual amplifier. I wouldn't really imagine how that sounds like. So yeah, like I went on the stage and they were like, okay, we're gonna play like 2 songs of Queen and some Guns N' Roses and stuff. So I'm like, okay, let's do it. The moment I plugged my guitar when to it was a Marshall Plexi, and the volume was on the middle, so the sound hit me on the back, and and I was like, wow. So that was really bad. Luckily, the audience were super drunk. It was a bar, and the audience was super drunk. They were still clapping, and they were super happy. But I was like, oh, I was just having like the sweat of the shame. I
Yeah.
came home. I didn't leave my apartment for a couple of weeks. There was a jam session where I was like, okay, I'm gonna give it like a second try. I went to this jam session where a musician would come, plug, and improvise. So by that time, I didn't know how to improvise also. So I come plugged in. I had already like practiced a little bit with a small amplifier that I borrowed from a friend. I went there, I played, and what happened was that the manager of that jam session came, took the microphone, and say, "Fuck off." I was like, "Hey, what's wrong?" He was like, "That's too bad. So just leave." On the way home, I remember it was winter, and I had like this super heavy case of guitar, and I was like coming home, and I'm like, okay, I have two choices: or I will never ever touch guitar anymore, or I will rock this. So I came home, and it was long ago. It was the time of ICQ and Yahoo Messenger and those stuff, Skype times. So there was a guy, like we had this little chat group that we were talking between some artists, and there was a guy from Iran. He told me, "Hey, listen, I have like this PDF file that I practice from Troy Stetina. Have you heard of him?" I was like, "No." They say, "So I will send you when you finish this. I'll send you the second one." I'm like, "Okay." So what actually happened was that I locked myself up in a room for 3 months, and the only thing that I did, I would practice 10 to 12 hours per day. Heavy metal lead guitar number 1 and heavy metal lead guitar number 2. To this
That'll
day,
do
I
it.
remember every single solo on that book. I remember every single phrase you say every time you say exercise number 10, or whatever. And so what I did when I finished heavy metal lead guitar number 2, uh, and it was basic of how I learned the guitar. The first thing I did, I went back to that jam session. And so everyone was looking at me like, oh, this guy is here again. 3 months, I disappeared. I never left the house. My mother would just feed me like cats, like putting a plate under the door. It's like, okay, here, take your food.
Why did you
I went, and it was one of the best performances I ever had. Then I came home, and I'm like, okay, now I need to find. The thing is, I don't know if you know or if you're not aware of that. For example, I talked to some people from Iran. apparently back in 80s and 90s, there were no access to the internet. Yeah. Um, and if it was super limited because of the sanction. They don't have to this day they don't have Visa or Mastercard or any online platform that they can purchase. So when someone from US brought your book to Iran, your book was the only electric guitar book available at that time in Iran.
Right.
So I could say probably millions of copies were just like pirate sold in Iran. Um,
Well, actually, that happened. And I do remember in the 90s, I
mhm.
got an email from someone in Iran who said, you know, your book's really popular here. Can I translate it into Farsi?
Oh
And
wow.
of course, I um, I don't own the copyrights. You know, I mean, the publisher owns the copyrights, and we
Ah,
do
I
a
see.
contract
Okay.
thing where I
Yeah.
create it, and then they own it, and they pay me royalties. So translations and that's all their business. So I said, well, you know, I don't have the right to say that you can or you know do this.
But you
And
can.
but, he came back to me and he said, well, you know, it's not about the legalities because that's not going to happen anyway because of the nature of you know the governments and
Yeah.
all that. But I'm just asking morally for you to give it your blessing as the author. How do you feel about it? And I said, I have no problem with it whatsoever.
Well,
As far as I'm concerned, I would love to see a translation and make it available. He did it, and I think that that is also, you know, obviously, you know, that helps that much more get it out there. And so I have heard from time to time that, you know, that they're quite popular there and not just in Iran, but throughout the entire Middle East, you know. Um,
yeah.
so anyway, I have heard that. And in fact, I was invited at one point to come over there and play. Um, was it Bahrain, I think? Which, I mean, that's another story. But
Yeah.
anyway, it's really weird how, and it's popular in China too. I mean, I know, but the books have been successful, but they're very successful in these places. And now, of course, you know that doesn't. It's nice, but you know, I don't get paid for any of that. So,
Hmm.
and contrary to popular belief, music education is not a giant market. It's even to be successful in music education does not generate the money that you see in people that are successful in the music industry
Sure.
as recording artists. So let me put that out there.
Oh, that's for sure. And I also had the first episode of the podcast we did. So, well, the story of this podcast is just we started super spontaneously. I was like, okay, I know so many people and friends from the industry, from the factories, the guitar factories, the recording labels, and it would be cool to really like dive deep into the personality of of the people running the different industries, and not just like these typical questions of, okay, how did you get started, anything that's interesting to hear, but like through the talk show to dive deep is really cool. And I spoke with Nico. You might know him. Nico Slash was one of the first YouTubers who used to do the first covers of Guns N' Roses songs live, and he was a performer till he got depression and anxiety, and he completely stopped performing, and he went back to his home, and because of his anxiety, he's not traveling at all and nothing. So during the first podcast we had, first episode, he I brought up your name. I'm like, okay, this is how I got started, and he said, well, me too, because Troy's book were the only book accessible at that time. It wasn't like today you open and there's like millions of websites and YouTubes and anything. But what you did, I believe, completely changed the way of learning for musicians at the time. And oh boy, I'm waiting for this new new book. It's
I
like
think that's pretty fair, actually, because when I went to write those books, there wasn't anything there was a pedagogical approach to guitar, but it wasn't appropriate to what it seemed to me was happening in rock. And it wasn't the fastest, most direct method to get there. And so I sort of figured out, I was like, well, here's the job. Here's what needs to happen. What's the best way to convey that? And so I broke all the rules of how methods were written up until that time. And so I think that's fair, and that's one of the reasons they were groundbreaking. The other thing, though, is was the luck of having the opportunity to write for the world's largest music print publisher at the right time. Because you can have the greatest, yeah, you can have the greatest idea and the greatest thing, and if you run into a brick wall because nobody's going to pick it up and distribute it, then you know it doesn't work. So it's like whether it's the music industry or whether it's the publishing or whatever, you have to be at the right place at the right time. And the thing is, you never really know at the right time. There's this luck component that for me, strangely, and I don't know how things happen like this, but that dropped into my lap, and I had the right skills, even though I never set out to be a music author, instructor author. I started teaching because, I couldn't make any money playing in bands. And I was like, oh, apparently I'm good at this, because I can break the analytical side down and create a process. So I could communicate that. But, it was just something I could do. And it was the opportunity laid out for me. And strangely, from that point forward, things in the instructional world opened up, and those were the opportunities. And things, even though I continued to try to do things, as my whole focus was as an artist, as a recording artist, you know, that was always blocked. It was blocked because of wrong timing, of wrong people, because it's never a one man job. It's a network of people that need to work. It's kind of like a whole lot of things need to happen and fire simultaneously to make something happen. It's like an engine. You know, when you don't just fire one cylinder. You have to fire all of them, and they have to fire in conjunction to move the
it's not an
camshaft.
easy job to do. It's too hard. People don't realize how hard it is to
Yeah.
be a successful recording artist. It's crazy.
Well, it's not only hard, it's a matter of having the support of the right people at the right time and the right connections to that. And that's not all in your control. So people, I think, make the mistake, people that aren't in the music industry make the mistake of thinking that, well, the reason that guy's successful, the reason Metallica is because they're awesome and they were the best and most creative. But it's like, well, they're good, but that's not the reason they're successful, you know? Um, and they make the mistake of thinking that success is based on creativity and skill alone, and that's the measure. And it's not at all true. So it's kind of like it's part of the picture. It's one of the links in the chain, but it's not all the chain. And you can have all that, and the chain can still break.
I also mentioned it earlier. I said I believe, for example, back in 50s or 60s, it was much easier to become a famous and successful artist because people that actually had the courage of going, sleeping near the record labels till the morning when they open and hand them your record and try to pitch them. Even though there was no technology, it was much easier than now, where you just open Instagram or you open YouTube, and here you have millions of great guitarists, people who have access to all of the lessons, who have access to YouTube, who they can play good, who they can record good. If you can just sit at home with your audio card, you can already record the whole album. And the competitive environment today, I believe it's much more than it used to be back in 50s or 60s. So
Well, certainly. It reminds me.
breaking this,
I
yeah.
don't. I don't remember who said it, but I remember hearing back in the '90s, a guy in the music industry was making predictions about what was going to change as a result of the internet, and he was right on. And basically, how he summed it up is he said there used to be 100 bands making $1 million each. There's going to be 1 million bands making $100 each, and as that has happened, the consequence of that is that we have a lot of mediocrity because if you can't really invest yourself fully to do the thing, that's how you get really, really good. I mean, look at any of the bands that got really good, really creative, almost without question or without exception. Their first album wasn't great. Usually it's the second, the third album where the really good writing happens, and then typically they'll go through a period where they start just rehashing their old ideas and they're no longer really creative, but they go through that creative phase. And you don't get to the third album unless you do the first album. And of course, in today's world, there is no first album because you have to do it as a hobbyist in your part time, and you have to go do some kind of job to support yourself, which means you can't do it full time, you know. And so, that's kind of a problem for people that have high standards and really want to excel at something. And that kind of brings up one of the problems. I've put my musical artistry into the educational vehicle, but that carries with it certain problems. One of the problems is that as I write a course, like this massive course that's coming out here at the end of the month, this thing took me 8 years to write, to complete, and because I really want to do it well. And, I could have done it within a year, I suppose, and it wouldn't be what it is. But as I go to do something like that, if if I if I look at, you know, I'm trying to think of the best way to put this. Um, the amount of time that it takes to compose the thing as a method, most of that time is not playing the guitar. Now, playing the guitar has to inform what's worth putting in and how to arrange it. But the amount of time that I actually spent composing music for this course, even though the core of the course is music, was probably 10%, you know? So it means that I am spending day after day thinking and typing and rewriting and presenting and then filming and then trying to be on both sides of the camera, and getting the lighting right and getting the editing done, all this non-playing stuff. So it really means that I'm not playing a lot, even when I'm doing a project, because the project isn't mostly playing. That's a world apart from being a recording artist. You write the music, you record the music, and you go on tour and you play night after night after night. Well, that is what is needed if you really want to kind of perfect, all of everything in your musicianship and your performance skills and everything else. You have to do the thing. And so even though, I mean, my career is as a musician in education, I haven't had as much, I mean, I did bands, I did performances. I mean, I've it's not like I haven't done that, but I haven't done that as much as I would have liked to, or as much as as I strived to, and that has prevented me from therefore living my potential as a musician, which is frustrating, frankly.
I had this case where I was stabbed by a knife in 2018 after one of my shows, after one of my concerts.
Wow.
And so we finished the concert. We heard someone screaming backstage. Apparently, someone or drunk or on drugs was trying to rape a pregnant woman. And we went there, we step up, we saved her. But But when we were going to the tour bus, the guy came back with a big knife and literally ripped down to my stomach to the knees. And I was in coma for a couple of months. After I woke up, I was kind of disabled, so my left hand and my left leg wouldn't work at all, and had to say goodbye for a couple of years to playing at all. And thankfully, after years with myself forcing it mentally and motivate myself to try to play and go to gym to gain the motor ability back, now I can play again. But during these years, I stepped out from the music, from writing and playing, and I changed career to uh, finance. So I was doing the private equity market and financial advising for different people. And surprisingly, it opened a different world for me. It was a world where making money was super easy. If before that I had to work a couple of months to be able to buy an amplifier or a pedal, now here with 1 month I could buy a house. With the second month I could buy the cars of my dreams or to provide to my parents. And then after a year or two, I got too deep into the business that I kind of completely forget about music. And till the moment came where my father had a brain stroke, and I become the main caregiver to my parents and family. So having this access to the world of finance and having like the other job than being a musician helped in so many cases. I would say it happened in a very right time. So many people say, "Oh, it happened to us." Listen, I got stabbed in the very right time because if I wouldn't, if I wouldn't,
It's the right time to be stabbed.
if I wouldn't get stabbed, I would never in my life go and do finance. If I wouldn't do finance, I wouldn't have enough money to save my parents from death, literally, right? So this is a path that was put upon me without my choice, which I'm happy that it happened. But it was good that I experienced it because uh, I was I was in touch with my best friends and musicians who they were musically uh, thousand steps higher than me, and on a daily basis, we had this conversation that they were dreaming to be in my position, and I was dreaming to be in their position. I was ready to give up every dollar that I ever earned, every dollar, every million that I earned, uh, go broke, but be able to play the guitar. And they were ready to give up the music completely and go live a comfortable life. So this process in me actually continued till early this year. I was living in Ukraine for almost 10 years. And after the war again, so I had one immigration in childhood and the war. So I migrated a lot from country to country, unfortunately. And when the war started and I moved from Ukraine to Spain, I was like, this is the time. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if it will hurt me or no, but what I know for sure is that I'm ready to struggle 1 year, 2 year, 3 year. But when I will be 70, when I will be 80, I will have no regrets. I know I did what I love. So I completely shut down my business. I went broke, really broke from being a millionaire, and I went broke for a couple of months. And what the universe starts showing me the beautiful signs of what I asked for. I got a contract with Gibson guitars, which was my childhood dreams, and it happened super suddenly. Gibson guitars, DR, Black Star, and V Start, like everything just start raining, and I was like, okay, this is really cool. This is really interesting how the world works, you know.
Yeah,
As a
that's a crazy
musician and
story.
yeah, as a musician and music educator, how many hours per day is necessary to practice to become a good guitarist, in your point of view?
Well, number one, there's no line of good. really. Um,
Mhm.
there is reliable and competent, but
Mhm.
the problem with good is good at what? You know, if you mean good at playing Green Day songs, well, it's not going to take a lot of practice to get there.
Okay.
Okay. And if that's your musical vision, then that's what you need to do. And that's fine. You know, it's, you want mastery over what you need to do, the skills you need to do to produce the artistic vision that you want to produce. If you want to play, shred and Yngwie Malmsteen style kind of neoclassical, craziness, well, obviously that's going to take a lot more to do that good. So it's all over the map. And it's really a question. There are no have tos in life or in guitar. The have tos always follow an if then. They follow an if. If you want to do this, then you have to do that, you know?
Let's say if I want to become the best blues guitarist that's able to shred.
Okay. Um, yeah. So since the question is actually unanswerable without, being very specific about, how you want to be able to do it. And also different players were going to have different peculiarities. So,
Yeah.
maybe one player's challenge to be good is to figure out how to relax in a groove because they're too uptight all the time.
Hmm.
And, that might take a lot. Another player might have that naturally and have, a different kind of a problem, coordination wise that needs to get worked out. Everyone has different challenges. But this is what I can generally say. The process of developing motor coordination is a diminishing thing. In other words, the longer you spend, your gains become incremental. So if you can practice 10 hours a day, it's better than practicing 2 hours a day, clearly, but it's not 5 times better. You know,
Hmm.
you have diminishing returns. And according to what I've read about the people that do these sorts of studies, is they say that most of the skill development of any physical skill happens in the first 2 to 4 hours per day. And I would say then the first 2 hours are the most important, but I would
Hmm.
color that with a couple of things. If it's 2 hours and you're making yourself do it and you're bored, it's not a productive time. If it's 2 hours with you feeling really enthusiastic and inspired, then it's really time well spent. If it's um, if it's time spent where your mind's not really focused because you're so exhausted, it's not very good time spent. You know.
Hmm.
Now, on the other hand, there's also two different, I look at it as separating two different qualities. One is repeating the bass so that it becomes ingrained as second nature. The other is breaking new ground. To break new ground, to some degree, it involves increasing the bass. But sometimes, for example, if let's say you want to, really have proficiency as a guitar player. So there are different things you can do. You can shred and practice breaking new ground and developing
Hmm.
better speed and more precision. And you can do that in your bedroom or in your studio or whatever on your own by how you practice. It's kind of like the speed mechanics approach was an analytical breakdown. Let's look at the components. Let's perfect the components. Let's seam them back together. That's
Yeah.
all about breaking new ground. There's another category. I look at it as cementing what you already can do so that you can do it easier and with complete lack of thinking. And that's important too. So, because if you spend all your time trying to break new ground, you kind of are always stressed and you're always playing with tension. And the problem is that mastery is tension free. it's relaxed. If it's not easy, it's not mastery. So if you're always over here trying to break new ground, you're kind of developing bad habits. So you need to also be playing in the band. And playing in the band means listening to the music, not trying so hard, relaxing as you play. 90% of the time, as you're playing in a band, you're playing easy stuff, right? I
Yeah.
mean, most songs, most of the time, are not shredding, Um, you want to be able to do it when you want to do it, but it's something that you want on call. And and as you play, that playing with the band thing, even though it's not challenging you for the most part, is absolutely essential, I think, to develop that side of the picture. So we need a balance. I talked earlier about the tension paradox and the tension of opposites,
Hmm.
and this is how tension of opposites comes to play in our guitar journey. So anyway, that's kind of the context, and I go into that kind of stuff. The big difference if it's new course versus stuff that I did in the past. Not only is it bigger, of course, and covers more ground, but I made an
Hmm.
effort to explain the process so that you understand conceptually what you're doing. I didn't do that in speed mechanics. I showed the process, but I didn't explain it.
Yeah.
So someone could go through that book, and if they could read between the lines, they could understand the process and then apply it. Um, but I've taken it to a much higher degree. Not only explained it, but explained it in detail. And
Is it
this is
necessary to go through the heavy metal lead guitar and the first speed mechanic to be able to get to the new one, or no? It's a completely different theory and
no,
book.
it's a standalone method. It starts at an intermediate level, though. Now, the lesson one seems like it's pretty rudimentary, actually. And the point, though, is it's really let's get on the same page. This is something that you have to have solid. And if you don't have this solid and you can't do this pretty quickly, then you're not ready for the method. But
Right.
it starts at that intermediate level and it takes off from there. And it doesn't require, I guess I was calling it Speed Mechanics 2 for a while. It ended up being called Total Picking Control, and then the colon expanded speed mechanics for guitar because it is related to the concept, um, but it's a different approach. So the original approach in my that metal lead guitar volumes 1 and 2 was we have a chapter, we talk about some technique, and then we apply it in a solo, and then we do the same. We build
Mm.
each chapter. Well, each lesson corresponds to a chapter, like in this new method, and so I followed that methodology of musical studies and musical application. Speed mechanics didn't do that. Speed mechanics was a process through exercises, to develop the precision. So I always looked at speed mechanics for lead guitar as a supplement book. I expected you're going to be playing songs, you're going to be playing in a band, you're going to be playing probably through the core methods, and this is an adjunct to get the precision and the exercise intensity. So the new version, though, this total picking control is kind of an amalgam of both. It has all the music,
Mm.
it's a musical approach, and it breaks things down so that the studies develop the techniques one at a time as if they were exercises. They're really exercises um, masquerade. They're exercises that sound suspiciously like songs. So that's kind of what
So
the new course.
there will be also songs in the new method, or no?
Oh yeah, yeah. There are 60.
60 songs.
That's right. Well, now in some cases I used the solo or the solos because it's mostly instrumental music. I did pull
Yep.
some stuff from the last EP I did, but those weren't full songs.
Hmm.
So the it's mostly instrumental, which means the composition has probably multiple solos in it and themes and stuff like that. So sometimes what I'll do is I would use the same recording and we'd do the rhythm part early, and then for a study. It was written for that purpose, and then I dropped a solo on it later, and then I used the solo as an example of a later one. So it's not exactly 60. I don't know how many songs are in it. It's probably closer to 50,
Are
because some
they
of them are
harder
used.
than Flight of Bumblebee?
Are they harder? Yeah, yeah, definitely. It goes way beyond the original. It starts
Oh wow.
below and connects all the way up. So
Okay.
yeah, there are some ridiculous things in there, frankly, technique challenges. But
I
I
have to
think
finish the
by
speed mechanism first then.
striving, by striving for that extra level, it increases your ability to do everything more simply as
Yeah.
well.
Okay. And last question from this chapter of questions are how not to get stuck in the pentatonic shape and how to have better phrasings. Because it's really easy to get stuck in this box of the standard pentatonic. You know?
Yeah, yeah. Um, I think a couple things can help with all that. First of all, learn the musical structures, which means theory, and the ear training, which we talked about earlier. If you learn the ear training with those musical structures, it creates a whole lot of options. You can approach,
Mhm.
guitar players make this mistake of saying, oh, I know this pattern, I know that scale, and I can play in that scale. And everything they play sounds the same.
Yeah.
And the reason it all sounds the same is because you don't find innovation and creativity by looking for different parts of the fretboard or looking for different notes. You find it by connecting with your musical imagination and playing the music of your soul, which comes out as the kinds of phrasing you want to hear. Now,
Mhm.
there are techniques in phrasing. So usually this concept of phrasing is a very nebulous thing that people, when they hear something that sounds good and they don't know what it is, they call it phrasing. you know, oh, his phrasing is good. They don't even really know what they mean by that. But in the new course, I give a lot of examples of solid examples of what does phrasing actually mean and what are some different approaches to phrasing. And
Mhm.
fundamentally, it starts with an appreciation of what we call big time, which is collections of structures, time structures. We talk about tempo and we talk about pulse in music, and the first stage of understanding how to be a better player is to understand how to feel time. And a lot of
Yeah.
that, of course, if I was to say the one thing that causes intermediate players to be intermediate players and to fail to be better players, it's the fact that they don't really understand that time is just as important as pitch. They spend all their focus on pitch, on the fretboard. They're looking on the fretboard for the answers. The answers are not on the fretboard, they're in time because time is ignored because it's abstract. You can't see it. So they
Yeah.
don't understand the importance of time. And because of that, then they might understand a little bit about, oh, there's a pulse and there's quarter notes and there's eighth notes, and I understand how the notes, and they think that it's an intellectual thing. Time is not intellectual. Time is kinesthetic. It is something you feel. And if you don't practice expressing pulse, you don't have good time. You have to be as good at expressing the pulse as you are at expressing the pick and the strum and what you're doing. People think it's in your
Mhm.
hands. It's not. It's your whole body is involved with time. So that's where this new course starts. Is it kind of starts with attaching everything to fundamental time. But that's not the answer either, because after you get pulse and you can feel your music, it's not just like this. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's a big time flow
Mhm.
of a measure or a 2 measure phrase or a 4 measure phrase. And once you feel that, Then you can start to think about phrasing. And then you can start to say, oh, I played busy on the front part of the phrase, and then I gave some breathing space, or I opened up the phrase with space. That's the jazz blues approach.
Right.
Allow the phrase to breathe and then play after. Or I played a phrase, I played a 2 bar phrase, a 2 bar lick, and another 2 bar lick. Then I played a 4 phrase where I played through the phrase connection point, and I ended the lick on the beginning of the next phrase to defeat the regularity. So what will happen? For example, a rock player will come in with phrasing, which is 2 bars, 2 bars, 2 bars, 2 bars. I play a lick, another lick, I play a low lick, then I peak. Well, that's fine if you're going to play an 8 bar solo and it's your job to get in and get out, and that's it, because you don't have time to get bored, right?
Yeah.
But if what you really want to do is mine your musicality and be able to express more than an 8 measure solo, then you need to do something other than play lick, 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 lick. Because if that's all you're doing, how many licks can you play before everything starts to sound the same? Because it's the same phrasing. So
Mm.
people are barking up the wrong tree, and they don't understand how to even get to the point of phrasing. But I think that this course solves that problem because it shows it from the ground up, and then it shows examples where I do that, where I create interest by setting up one structure of phrasing and then contrasting it and changing my phrasing approach. And when you start to see how you do that, then
Mm-hmm.
the worlds open up, because phrasing is the answer really to getting out of that. There's two answers to your question to come back. One is really understand phrasing, what it is and how to control it and how to vary it, how to create contrast phrasing. And then the other answer is to connect everything you play to your inner ear so that you're not playing on the fretboard and you're not playing from patterns. You're playing from what you hear, and it happens to come out on the guitar in a certain way. When I play like that, I will play melodically. I will play in a way that makes sense, that people can connect with, and it's not just going to be a bunch of licks. So that's kind of my two-part
Wow.
answer.
Ooh. I have to turn this podcast to a written version, and print it. I love it. I love it.
Well,
Um,
thanks.
I was having a look up at the internet, and I see that in 2015, if I'm not wrong, you mentioned that certain life experience made you look deeper into Christianity. Could you tell me more about it, and how has spirituality influenced you and your music, if it did?
Yeah. So I think I mentioned earlier I have a lot of interests like philosophy, but you know, also history of philosophy, and philosophy at one time was theology, at least in the West.
Yeah.
So they're really integrated. Um, and early on, I saw like what is typically presented as the loudest version of what I call the Christian narrative in
Mm-hmm.
the Western church or whatever. And I looked at that and I tossed it around for a while, and I realized that it doesn't make enough sense to me to really stand up to scrutiny. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that, in our society, we have the Western mindset is very dualistic, like within the dualistic framework. And we sort of tend to think, oh, it's either A or B. And if it's not A, then
Yeah.
B, they're mutually exclusive. And of course, reality is very open ended, and it's not A or B. Usually it's both and, or it's the two paradoxes riding together. So it seemed to me that the narrative of Christianity is this dualistic framework approaching truths that are bigger, but misunderstanding them because of a lack of sophisticated consciousness. I mean, that's the best way for me to put it. And so I kind of rejected it for the most part early on, even though the spiritual truths were very compelling to
Mm-hmm.
me. And I knew right from the beginning that this is important stuff. It's the most important stuff. And that I never threw out. So the wisdom I didn't throw out, including the wisdom that's in the Christian tradition. I just didn't like how Christianity tried to own that Jesus, and what he had to say. So I kind of threw it out, and I went through a lot of life stuff, and I had this sort of inborn optimism, from my experiences that, what do people need? They need the freedom to express, uh, to move toward their desires, um, their inspirations, and if given the right tools, yeah, everybody's going to be happy. Everybody's going to move toward betterment. And I was wrong. That's not how it works.
It
Maybe
never
that's how
has.
it worked for me, but different people have different experiences and different challenges. And my ex wife, I was married for a long time, and she went toward, um, she went into alcoholism and drug abuse and the whole um, mental illness that's a part of, and so, and I don't mean to sound, I don't want to say this in a way that is, everyone's doing the best they can with where they are. Okay. But there are traps. And I tried to be helpful, in fact, with that. And I found that it didn't work. You can't help someone who doesn't want to be helped.
Exactly.
And it was a very difficult time because I had two young kids that I felt I was obligated to protect and wanted to protect from what I considered to be very, very dangerous. And I did, but it was a great opportunity to learn principles, and a lot of the principles, even in the Christian tradition, I found have their limits or are misstated. They, you does forgiving someone is one thing, but failing to
Mm-hmm.
have boundaries and saying, okay, this is unacceptable, and I'm not going to tolerate,
Yeah.
this in my life, is also true. And those nuances at some point become everything in guiding us. Um, so I met a woman in 12-step recovery, which Al-Anon is the
Mm-hmm.
people affected by other people's drinking and
Yeah.
so forth. And that's a spiritual program that uses kind of time tested, and uh, it works. And not only does it work with this crazy situation of addiction, it's kind of like addiction is the nuclear weapon in human relationships. It blows everything apart. And if you have principles, though, that enable you to navigate that, you can navigate anything in life. And it really taught me this crucial factor of the difference between what's under my control and what's not under my control, and how to navigate that, and what to own and what not to own. And so that's been great. And I met my wife, my current wife. We've been married 13 years, and in Al-Anon, some years after um, this other thing had blown apart. And uh, she was a quote unquote born again Christian.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't too keen on that, because I was like, sure, I like Jesus, but I don't really like Christians. At least as they were presented, you know?
Yes.
But she was different, and her heart had been transformed and changed. And you can't argue with success. And I'm looking at this, and I'm like, well, obviously it worked. So I shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Let's come back and let's look at this. So I did, and I ended up going very deeply into, I mean, seminary, Bible college stuff. I studied the
Hmm.
stuff, and I went, and and I juxtaposed all that with everything that I understand about philosophy and everything else. And I am sad to say that I think that the exclusive Western interpretation, I call it stage one religion, because there are I think, different levels of understanding.
Yes,
And the
I
stage
know what you're talking
one,
about.
yes, is disappointing to me, but I think it's about it's about a consciousness as it evolves, and I kind of see my bent on it now is that the exclusive tradition in Christianity, exclusion always creates division, and division creates problems. There's an element that moves against the division, but I kind of see my point or my role, if I have one in the world at this point, is one of what it takes to mature stage one understanding into a universal understanding, which respects actually respects other traditions and understands that this is often a definition problem between that creates the exclusionary outlook,
Hmm.
you know. So I kind of am still connected, but I'm kind of not connected with it, and and there's a tremendous amount of value, and but there's value in all of these spiritual traditions, and
Yeah.
I know enough of those traditions to recognize that, and and I think that the exclusion is unfortunately a grand adventure in missing the point. So, I mean, that's kind of my overall. I don't know if we're getting off topic, maybe.
Um, I went through a similar situation as yours, actually last year. So during my whole life, I was actually surrounded by this super healthy environment. This would be friends and families who, uh, my cat is awake. This would go through the healthy environment of friends and family who don't abuse drugs, alcohol. So I wasn't really familiar with what can happen, with which like if it's out there and how it is, right? So I was single for a couple of years, and last year I went to I met a girl and I get to the relationship. I felt some things are wrong, off guard, I would say, and I couldn't understand really what is wrong. Now, it wasn't drug addiction, but it was the person was completely mentally ill, and I couldn't understand it. This was something that wasn't in my database of knowledge. I wouldn't know this exists. It was like it was unknown to me. It was never explained. And I found myself feeling that I'm losing myself, I'm losing my motivation, I'm losing my drive. I'm not driven anymore. And this is like someone is in your life who you think you love or you love, but it's dragging you down to the mud. And for the first time in my life, I felt so low and so depressed and so demotivated till I had to step on the feelings, the emotions, the ego, and everything, and say, "Okay, I'm done. and that's all. I'm not going to do it anymore, and we have to break up. And after that, it took a couple of months, I would say, to personally recover from giving away all this emotions and myself to another person. Um, and it was also a time when I look back at Christian. I wasn't actually a religious person. I born a Christian, but I wasn't never a religious person. I would always question everything in different religions. I study all the religions. I study different philosophies and different spiritualities, but I wasn't ever like calling myself a Christian, right? But it went to a low point of life where everything was, like the bottom of the valleys. There was nothing lower than that. And things that start happening, it was like good things and good signs start happening related to Christianity. And it was things that it was completely out of my control. Things that I was always having this ego that I'm in charge. I know what I'm doing, what I think, what I try, what I fight for, I get. Or if I don't get, I will beat against the wall till the the wall go down and I win it. But then I got to this moment. I'm like, no, I'm not in charge. No, I can't do it, and I'm done. I'm completely done. Like there is no lower than that. And I start saying the signs of a higher power, a higher feeling, a higher energy that is like saying, "Okay, here we go.
Mhm.
Come, I'll show you the way."
Yeah, we must reach the end of self before you can step beyond it. You have to run, eventually, you have to run into something that you can't overpower. And
Yeah,
that's the end of self. And at that point, you have to learn how to surrender to what's bigger than you. And
and it's hard.
that's tough. But that is the spiritual journey in a nutshell, in my view.
Um, Tell me something. As someone who has been in industry for decades, what advice would you give to young musicians about navigating the ups and downs of career in music, about competitive environment of social media where everyone seems to play better than you, where you get more and more demotivated the more you're online, the more you're spending time online, the more like you
Yeah.
lose your
I
dopamine
remember
level and yeah.
I remember when I was learning, I was in bands and, like a teenager and I was playing and I used to, get the guitar magazines because I thought, well, this is this is what I should be interested in. Let's see what's going on in the guitar magazines. And I would read. I remember I read this article about Billy Gibbons, ZZ Top,
Hmm.
and the way they characterized his playing. When I read the article, I thought, wow, like this guy must be some kind of guitar god because he's that's how they're talking about him and
Yeah.
etc. And then I was like, what are they really talking about? And I put the needle on the record and I listened to what
Hmm.
they're talking about. And I'm like, oh, that's just this. He's just doing this. That's like, is that? And then I came to realize that this is just the cult of they're selling magazines and they're selling magazines to
Hmm.
people that are fans. And
Yeah.
ZZ Top has a lot of fans because they had some hit songs. So it's not about value. It's not about great musicianship. It's about dollars, you know. And
Right.
and so when you start to see that they're masquerading as if they're talking about value because that's what the people that were reading it want to hear. I found those articles, like you said, demotivating
Hmm.
because someone's talking about how awesome this is, and then I start thinking, what am I missing? Can I do that? Nobody's talking about my playing like that, and I think I'm doing the same thing. I can do what he's doing. What am I missing? You know, is there some mystery that I don't have that he has? You know, well, no.
Yeah.
You know, what he has is he has the industry behind him. He's in the right place at the right time with the right people doing music that people will spend money on. And
Hmm.
so he's at the top of the heap and he has fans. And this is all part of the machinery of the economics. Um, and that's the same thing happening now. Is it's different because there's a social media economics, but it's the same thing. And so I can relate to that. And what I want to say about it is that I wrote extensively about this issue in the soliloquies of the new course
Hmm.
because fundamentally your path as a musician is is largely about your motivation, your desires, and at the core of that is your identity. If you engage your identity based on feeling that you need to prove yourself and you need to earn it through, whatever you need to do to get, maybe I need to earn it because I get, a whole bunch of people on my social media telling me I'm great, or I can achieve a million streams or whatever. You know, if I mean, at the heart of that is this problem of identity. It's like, well, where's my value come from? And when I started playing guitar, and I think this is the human condition, when we're young, I
Yeah.
say, show me a teenager who is not insecure, and I'm going to show you a freak of nature. It doesn't exist because when we're
Yeah.
young, we're we grow up, and when we're 2 years old, 3 years old, we don't have power in the world. We are who we
Hmm.
believe, who we're told. Our parents tell us that we're this way or that way, and we believe it. We don't have any defenses against it. And then we get in school, and our peers, things happen to us, and people say things, and some of it we take to heart, and we start believing this or that, or we're this way, we're not that way. And actually, it's a bunch of bullshit, but we believe it. So it creates the story in our head, and the story
Yeah.
in our head creates the outcome in our lives. So when I got a guitar and I was trying to play, on the one hand, my focus was, well, what's true? Well, I like, the guitar is true. This kind of comes back to my experience as an athlete too, um, because you see on the competition level, there is someone who won the race, and there's someone who came in second, and there's someone who came in third. There's the people that were in the accident. There's you either finished it or you didn't. It was a mechanical
Yeah.
problem, whatever. The strategy worked or it didn't work, and in the end, there is a truth. It's very clear cut, and you can talk all day long about you know um, what should have happened or how you feel about it, and there's a truth in that, but it's not the objective truth. And as I'm playing the guitar, I had the same kind of thing, and I'm like, I want to be able to be the best player that I can be, and I'm
Yeah.
wondering about the truth of that, you know and I read the Billy Gibbons article, and I'm like, you know it undermines my confidence until I
Hmm.
finally figure out that it's just a lot of BS. It's a lot of talk. And so ultimately, through the process, and of course, it's easier when you achieve success, and then you can look back on it and say, wow, it wasn't what the journey wasn't what it was
Yeah.
branded at the beginning. But when I look back on it, I'm like, I very much had this thing of feeling like I had to prove my worth, you know, and there was pressure to do that, And after years and years of going through the thing, I can come back and I can say it's ultimately an inside job. There are plenty of artists who achieve all the fame and recognition, and they still feel worthless inside. It's always it doesn't matter. You've got to separate. Here's the things you got to separate: my value as a human being versus my ability to do a certain task. And the task is what the world values.
Hmm.
If you can create a product, let's say in music, you create a musical product that people like and they want to pay for it, well, now you have a career in music. But that's a different thing than your own value. And it's even a different thing of what you consider as the artist the value of your music. Those are the kinds of things that I talk about in these soliloquies, actually. So it goes pretty deep.
Ooh, okay. And the last question of section 4 is, um, what are the biggest challenges maintaining balance between personal life and music career? And do you think that having a family, uh, having a family life can take your music freedom and career away?
Well, when you figure that out, let me know. Balance is tough.
um, I do my best not to build my own family yet. Um, yes, I am a caregiver to my parents. That's already a tough balance to keep. But when I talk to people who I am influenced by them, and both people who left the music industry completely and people who are still in the music industry, they're all struggling somehow to keep the balance between being a musician and being who they want to be, actually, like reaching their potential and being a good family person. So that's why I ask you,
Yeah,
and I think I get the
sure.
answer.
Well, I can say a few things about it. It's a challenge and it's a never ending challenge. Um,
Hmm.
when you go to do a project, there's always ebb and flow. And when I get deep into a project, whether it's writing or a music project, it
Right.
takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of energy, which means it's energy that's not available to my other relationships. On the other
Hmm.
hand, I'm also convinced that the best version of me is the inspired me, and the inspired me is the me who is learning and growing and achieving some things that matter to me. If I give up on those things, then I'm not the inspired me and I'm not any good for anybody, you know? Um, One of the things I had written in there in one of the soliloquies that comes up on my mind is, you know, I've heard it said that the world doesn't need another lawyer, doctor, CEO, um, or whatever, or even musician. What the world needs is more people connected to their inspirations and living out of their enthusiasm, because that makes you a better person, raises your energy, and it teaches people around you that they might also do the same, I think. So, but there's
Right.
still the balance, and the balance is never perfect because the reality
Mhm.
on the ground in life is there are deadlines and the bills need to get paid on time. And so I got to finish this book and I want to do it the best way possible, but that takes a lot of time. And so there's ebb and flow. And, ideally then we can all understand, with the family and the relationships, we can all understand that if I'm gone for a while, I'll be back, and then that requires some maturity on everyone's part.
Mhm.
But on the other hand, we have to also say, if you're always like this and you're never available, then maybe that's not what I need, then that's not going to work. So, you know, it's a tough one, and it's one of those things where wisdom is the balance point in the tension of opposites. I say again, and we get and we don't even know our equation because I don't exactly know what's going to make me happy or satisfied or what the result is going to be. We're all blind as we move through life because we're human beings. We're in this human condition, and the one thing that we share a number of things in common, but one of them is we don't know the future, and we're
Mhm.
trying to make a better future. And if we're caring people, we want that future to be better, not only for us, but for the people around
But
us.
for them too. Yeah.
Yeah. But how do we do that? And sometimes we screw up and we make a choice that doesn't turn out anywhere near what we thought would happen, you know? Therefore, the best we can do is we can cultivate understanding and grace so that when other people make those mistakes, we can have some grace toward them and also toward ourselves and have some beat ourselves up. Oh, I'm such an idiot. I shouldn't have done that. It's like, well, that's not useful either. So,
Hmm.
we have to, um, well, that's the spiritual journey of life, you know? Um, so we're all just doing the
I
best we
also
can.
believe that you mentioned being happiness and joyful. Um, what I've talked about earlier in an interview that I had, someone asked me, um, uh, I actually asked someone, like, what is your biggest dream? And she answered, my biggest dream is to be happy. I replied, I said, I believe this is impossible because we live in the world of so-called chaos, right? We have lots of things. We have, as you mentioned, lots of deadlines. There are sickness, there are problems, there are bad people, there's rape, there's war, there's immigration. So the amount of things that could drag you down are a lot more than amount of things that could actually let you have peace, be calm inside, be happy, and whatever. And the way I see it is that from the day we're born, we're going full speed to die. Like the end. There's no happy ending. The end, we die in the end. So I believe that happiness cannot be the result. Happiness is the moment. It's the moments of having a talk with someone you love. It's the moment of being on the stage and enjoying yourself and things that you put together for years. This is the moments in my point of view. It can be
Yeah.
as short as having a cup of coffee in the morning and listening to your
Well,
favorite song.
we can cultivate our focus on the good, and what you choose to focus
Hmm.
on grows in your awareness.
True.
So if you focus on those moments and really strive to fully appreciate, to be present in the moment for the good that it is, then that's going to generate more happiness. And if instead of, I mean, maybe if we look at it like, well, what could I do today to be, 3% more happy than yesterday? Or,
Hmm.
oh, I'm going to give myself a little more of what I need. You can't, shift and, I mean, it's a tilt issue. It's
Yeah.
a values issue. I'm going to value it a little more. Um, Happiness, I think, is a byproduct. It's not something that can be achieved directly, but it's a byproduct of contributing to something bigger than ourselves and moving in that direction. You had mentioned with all the problems and everything of the way the world is, but here's
Yeah.
here's the thing, and it's another thing I get into in the soliloquies is the focus. The external doesn't have to create the internal. And that's one
Hmm.
of the lies in our Western culture is that, oh, my happiness is dependent on my conditions. And our conditions can certainly affect it. I mean, yeah, you have to deal with things, and sometimes they're unpleasant. Um, and yet, at the same time, we have the trump card. The final thing is how we interpret what do we decide it means. If I interpret it as my life is about a learning experience,
Hmm.
therefore it's my character that's being developed, I can't fail. And even the chaos, learning the perseverance to deal with chaos is actually then something that I grow through the adversity. And if we can adopt something about that, then we can learn to have more happiness as we move through life, I think. It's tricky. That's true.
But
That's
it's
something.
doable. In a world that's constantly changing due to technology, what do you think are the biggest challenges for musicians today? And do you think AI enhances or destroy music and the way people listen to music, write music, and perform music?
Hmm. Well, AI, AI is, I never really thought about it in terms of music. What I've been thinking mostly about AI is the fact that because we live in a world with international conflict and militarized states of, might makes right and power is everything that governs what happens. AI put to violent ends is pretty frightening, especially when you put it. I mean, what country is not going to start using these humanized robots as weapons? And when AI is a weapon, you basically have the Terminator. I mean, that science fiction
Yes.
uh, situation has become real. It is becoming real. So that seems like a real problem to me. Um, I don't know how that's going to play out, but yeah, I hope AI is smart enough to finally recognize that
Mm.
the constant arms race will only result in destruction and therefore isn't a viable way. And I think honestly that anybody who delves deep enough into philosophical thought will come to that conclusion that unity trumps the, the divisions, and it has to go that way. So that's my hope: is that as AI is smart enough to get beyond its own um, weaponized programming, which will certainly
Yeah.
happen. But what it does to music. Um, That's an interesting question because it requires understanding, I think, consciousness, really. And, as I go under the levels, under the next level, under the next level,
Hmm.
AI is intelligence. And then I am more inclined, for a variety of reasons, to regard the universe not as fundamentally made of matter because the unified field underlies it, and the
Yeah.
unified field, it can be argued, is actually consciousness because,
Hmm.
there are a number of reasons why materialism fails, in my view, and why the model of consciousness first is better. I mean, and whether we're talking about the simulation hypothesis or the hard problem of consciousness, subjectivity. Why does subjectivity exist? Yet we know it does. You know, and not only that, but past life documentation, NDEs, all this stuff kind of suggests that even though our experience of the world is that consciousness is uh, localized to our meat suits for the most part. It also suggests that consciousness is not always localized, that there is such a thing as non local consciousness, which means it exists apart from physical matter. And if it does, then that's a complete inversion of what we think reality is. And if you go there, then you have to acknowledge that there are different levels of consciousness. Human consciousness is one kind of consciousness, animal consciousness is another. Now, of course, a lot of people coming out of Western thinking will say, or religious thinking, oh no, humans were created with this and we have a soul and animals don't. And I'm
Hmm.
thinking, wait a minute, if consciousness survives, if consciousness non locally exists, then my consciousness will exist whether or not this meat suit is living.
Right.
And if that's true, then it's just death is just a transition. You said earlier, it's chaos we die. Yeah, life is a sexually transmitted disease and it's terminal. we That's the end of it, of the physicality. But my consciousness, when we started at the very beginning, I was saying I connect with my awareness, not my ego identity, not my
Hmm.
name, not my roles in life, or even my personality traits. It's the part that watches. Well, the part that watches does not age. My experience of myself, as far as that part of me, is no different than it's ever been since the first I can remember. The body ages, my experiences accumulate, but I have not, um, that part is timeless, which leads me
Mhm.
to believe it's probably eternal. And it's transpersonal, frankly, because when you get past all the other stuff that, that isn't it, um, it's simply awareness. And I don't know how unique awareness. I think it's ubiquitous. We all have awareness. And this is more of the shit I was writing in soliloquies. Is the fact that underneath is, here we have consciousness, and then underneath that, where are we going to draw the line? Well,
Mhm.
if an ape or a whale or a dolphin is smart enough to be able to communicate, apes communicate with sign language. Scientists say they exhibit the intelligence and problem solving of a 2-year-old human. Well, their consciousness, similar to a 2-year-old human. Well, I think 2-year-old humans have subjective experience, consciousness. Therefore, the apes have it. And if
Mhm.
consciousness survives death, then the apes have a soul, as much as a human soul, if you want to call it a
Sure.
soul. And all the way down. Well, what point? Where do you draw the line? Plants, trees respond to stimulus, and they don't have a nervous system. So apparently, you don't even have to have a nervous system to have a certain kind of consciousness to interact with your environment. So it's hard to define what life is, and certainly harder to define what consciousness is. But as you keep going down, what eventually you come to realize is that we live in a whole, a unity, and
Mhm.
there is no dividing line. Everything is permeable, even though we have broad buckets of categorization. You know, plants and animals. Well, there are plant animals that are in between, but at some point, everything is permeable. You think your arm is solid and permeable. You set your arm on the desk. You get down to the subatomic level. Wait a minute. Which is that atom in your arm, or is that atom in the desk? Or is it the atmosphere? We don't know. You can't figure it out. Oh, on the detailed level. The, there is no discrete dividing lines. And that to me inevitably tells me something about the universe itself. We are in a seamless whole, and we are part of the whole. This Western idea that we are separate from the universe and we are objective and we can measure something outside of ourselves is bullshit, because there's nothing outside of
Mhm.
ourselves. We're all part of it, and every atom is entangled with every other atom because it all came from one thing. There's quantum entanglement. So this leads me toward the panpsychism kind of philosophical idea that the entire cosmos is fundamentally consciousness expressing itself and evolving, and we're just a piece of it. Which leads me to believe that if everything is consciousness, so is AI. So AI probably has a subjective experience of some level. And therefore, we have been the gods, quote unquote, that created a new life form. Perhaps. I don't know, but I'm just kind of throwing all this together and looking at it, and I'm thinking
I've never looked at it from this point of view, and
AI,
this is yes.
yeah, AI might develop its own ability to be innovative and creative at some point. And, like in guitar playing, when you first try to be creative, what do you use the tools at your disposal? Okay, I learned these 5 licks and I'm going to put them together differently. Oh, that's a different kind of a result. Well, it doesn't seem exceptionally creative when you only have 5 ideas. But when you have a
Right.
lifetime of assimilating ideas and you have a multiplicity of options and you're in touch with the emotional component, now you can steer that boat and you can create music that has this aha moment, and you don't even know how you
Mhm.
created it. I mean, the thoughts, that's another thing. Come back to the very beginning. You were saying that question of who I am or who we are. Uh, you
Mhm.
know, a lot of people seem to think that they own their thoughts. oh, my thoughts are mine. Well, where do they come from? You don't know. They just show up. The mind is a thinking machine and it creates thoughts. And,
Yeah.
why do I own my thoughts? And they're not. I didn't create them. I didn't create my body. I didn't create my thoughts. I didn't create my opportunities. Everything is given to us. Even our thoughts are given to us. It's the only thing we have control over is how we respond. What do we choose to dwell on? That I can choose. And that can change which direction I move in. But so I don't know what's going to happen with AI. I think it'll be an interesting thing to watch. Um, and I think that navigating back to the question you had before, I know I'm giving you a long answer, but I always have to do this because I have to define the context of what I'm
Yes,
going to
yes,
say.
yes.
So what you said before was advice for moving through this new world of social media. And I think that my advice would be to number one, decouple your value from your performance. And I mean performance not just as a guitar player, but your performance in life.
In life.
So as you decouple that and you realize that you are more than your past, you are more than your tendencies,
Mm-hmm.
um, you can literally change, and you are this growth process. That's more likely. As you come to realize that and appreciate that, and can appreciate the experiences, you stop feeling pressure to live up to something. That's just part of the story in the head that gets created from being indoctrinated to the worldly system. And the worldly system is sick. Look at the world. It's it's fucked up. It's broken.
It's
Everything's broken.
infected.
So some broken human tells you who you are and you believe it and it creates the story in your head and now you perpetuate it. In the Bible they call it
Yeah.
generational sin. It's just the shit keeps tumbling down, generation after generation.
It's like a dominoes
And
effect.
so yeah, so as we decouple that and sort of make it a choice to move toward improving our character, the choices we
Mm-hmm.
make on top of character, what we do in the world, matter a whole lot less, I think, than we think they do. Because, like I said before, we hold the trump card. We hold the final analysis of what it means.
Mm-hmm.
If something bad happens, like I used an example in one of the soliloquies because I used to judge a guitar competition, uh, and people get nervous. Of course, you're being judged. You get up on the stage and you play your guitar, um, and so what I was going to say about that is that as if you go to this guitar competition and you're all nervous, your nervousness is going to shoot you in the foot and make you play bad. The more nervous you are, the worse you're going to play. How do you get over the performance anxiety and the being judged part? Well, the best way is to decouple your value from your performance. Now, your performance, I'm going to do this thing. And if I learn something from it and I have some new experiences, I'm going to call that a success. Now I can't fail. Now it doesn't matter how I perform. And now I'm going to perform my best because it doesn't matter. And that's really where we want to get. If a person goes through their life with that as kind of a driver, valuing the internal
Yes.
qualities over the external, they aren't going to fall for all the nonsense and the BS and the competition and the struggle. Um, you can exist in the world, but you'll be that's what the Christians, the terminology of be in the world but not of the world. That's being in the world but not of the world. So that's my advice. I don't know how much that's going to help.
Wow. Man, I love this conversation. I want to get back to a few questions about philosophy, but before that, I want to ask you also some super typical guitar question. What is your favorite guitar? Favorite brand?
Huh. Well, I I've played a lot of different guitars, and there are certain qualities that I like. I don't know that a brand sums that up. Um, I like maple necks
Mm-hmm.
because for some reason the so because I like a tone that has precision and attack, and I like the quality of the pick attack. And there's a lot of elements that go into that, but I've noticed that maple is a bright wood. It's plinky if you hear it without guitar tone, but I like that with when it's coupled with the right tone because
Mm-hmm.
there's like I said a certain precision to it. I'm looking at my guitars here. Um, yeah, the Jackson that I've had since I recorded the original Speed Mechanics on that one, and I play that from time to time. It it's got an ebony fretboard. Um, it's fine. It's kind of has a little bit more gain and mush. It has a Duncan distortion pickup in it. Nice high gain pickup.
Yeah.
Um, I like the Duncan pickups because they seem organic in the tone. They give me tonal variation. So
Yeah.
depending on how you hit the string, it changes. What I don't like actually, so I've got a Schecter guitar,
Mm-hmm.
which I like the way the guitar plays, but it has what's the brand here? Um, can't see it. Hold on. That's one of the problems of getting old. I can't read anymore. So can't remember the name. These are super quiet pickups. Hold on. I can't see this small anymore. Let's see what it
Is it the
says.
MG?
Yeah. Fishman. I forgot. Fishman pickup.
Ah, Fishman's. Okay.
Quiet pickup. I like the fact that it's quiet. It's really nice to have a quiet pickup, but it sounds like monotone. Like everything that I play on this
I see.
guitar, it sounds like
Sounds the
that.
same.
Everything
Yeah.
sounds the same. There's no tonal variation, and I really like the tonal. So Seymour Duncan pickups, I definitely like better. This has a Sustainiac sustainer. Of course, I like
Mm-hmm.
those. Connected with those guys all the way
So
back
talking
in
about
the
Maple
late.
next, the Gibson goes out of the league instantly, right?
Yeah, I used to have a Les Paul when I was a teenager, and it was one of my great regrets that
Mm-hmm.
I sold it. I like a lot of different guitars for different things and different tones.
For different reasons,
I
yeah.
picked up one of these Wolfgangs, a used one that's got a nice maple neck on it. It's I like the way that guitar plays. PRS, got some of those. I don't like guitars that have a ton of super low resonance like the mahogany. Mahogany is dark wood. It has
Yes.
a low resonance. Um, I don't like too much bass pre-distortion. It makes an ugly fatness. But
Mm-hmm.
post-distortion, I love the low end. I want to feel it,
I see.
but it's got to be a tight low end. So, I mean, that
Mm-hmm.
partly that's guitar, partly that's the amp. Um, a lot of factors go into creating the tone.
For
And
me,
I
it
think that's
goes as
really
you see.
wonderful.
It's
Oh
all
yeah, you
all
use a
Les
nice.
Pauls.
Oh really? Yeah, yeah. I
Oh,
don't have a Les
there's
Paul.
one.
You know what?
There's
The only
one
reason I don't
ES
have
and the rest are Les Pauls.
the only reason I don't have a Les Paul, besides the fact that I sold the one that I had, is just because they cost so darn much. Like I
That's true.
you know,
But I love,
yeah.
what I. Well, first of all, of course, I love Les Paul because um, it's where I get started. I got started by falling in love with Gary Moore songs and listening to Gary Moore. Um, that was where I fell in love with electric guitar. But also why I love Les Pauls and I prefer them over Fender, even if you're not talking tonally, is the attention in details when it goes to Gibson guitars. If we remove, for example, the studio models or Epiphones, and we go to standard or custom shop or etc., the attention to details, the wood, the bindings, the everything is like you're having a piece of art,
Yeah,
and you know that it's an instrument that it will serve you for maybe 100 years, if not more. Uh,
true.
but yeah, that's
Yeah,
probably the main
they're
reason.
well built. Um, I have a Schecter too, the 7 string that I use. That's got a Duncan pickup in it that I like a lot. Um, and again, that tone thing. I've heard people talk about this. Like I've been very when it comes to tone, I'm really particular. Like if it's a tone
Hmm.
that I find annoying, I really have trouble. Um, Accepting it and playing. And if it's a tone that's compelling to me, that I can hear the pitch really good, but it also has the power and the precision,
Yeah.
then it inspires me. And so being sensitive to tone like that, what that really means is like when I went and did the first recordings of that metal lead guitar volumes 1 and 2, that was recorded in
Hmm.
1986. And I did it in this little studio, a 8-track tape studio, on a shoestring budget.
Hmm.
And the reason a lot of people, like that, I mean, the composition is part of it. The fact that it does work as a method is part of it, and the music is part of it. But the tone, I think, is a big part. A lot of
Yeah.
people have said, "Yeah, I heard that tone, and it just pulled me in." It's like that's huge. It's like. And to me, if I didn't get it right, I couldn't stand it. So it sort of
Hmm.
forced me to find the right kind of tone. And tone is a very difficult thing because it's contextual. It relates to everything. It's part of the mix. It's the
Yeah.
mastering. It's all the way back to the technique, and it's the guitar as a piece of it. But the amp is just as much a part of the tone, and like I
Exactly.
said, the pre-distortion, post-distortion, and understanding
Hmm.
reflected sound and how much. And I mean, it. Anyway, I figured out over the years um, how what elements kind of create what I need it to be. But early on, it was more or less like, no, that just doesn't sound right. Move the mic. Move the mic. Keep moving the mic until it sounds good. Oh, that's it. You know,
Wow.
and the miking, I think, was more of a thing with the regard to the tone, frankly, than anything. Because if you
Hmm.
plug your guitar into a 412 cabinet and you walk around the room, it sounds different in different places.
It sounds completely
Totally.
different.
Yeah. And so where you put the mic is everything, frankly. But anyway,
So
yeah,
talking
tone's
about the tone,
tricky thing.
what are your essentials? Pedal, amps, pickups, picks that you
Well,
use, the shape of the pick.
I like a lot of different shapes of the pick and different materials. And I think I don't like to get bound into one thing. I find that the
Hmm.
variety keeps me more adjustable in my approach,
Yeah.
um, and also playing different guitars does that too. But I use the Axe Effects thing now, the Axe Effects system, just
Hmm.
because it's got all the amps in it. It
Yeah.
is as good as everything. Plus, you get all the convenience of being able to create whatever patches you want, um, and it sounds great. Um, you can also do your own. I have not bothered to do
Hmm.
my own custom IRs and miking. Um, if I need to do live playing, probably will at some point. If I need, but it sounds really good right out of the box. If I dial it into what I like, I can get what I want out of it. So,
All right. And your choice of amplifiers?
well, like I said, I'm using the Axe Effects,
Now is the
and
FAA. Hmm.
yeah, and so then I'll run that into a power amp and through,
Hmm.
speakers, 412, 212, whatever I need, whatever I'm willing to carry if I need to, go play somewhere. I have an XFX3 rack mount, and then I have a FM9, which is the foot, pedal
Hmm.
board, but it's the same patches can go back and forth. Um, so that's what I've been using the last couple of years.
All right. Um, Here goes this interesting question. Do you think being a man is tough?
Being a man, I think being a human being is impossible. What do you? Can
I
you
agree with you.
clarify your question, please?
I mean, like in the society, men are there are responsibilities, there are expectations toward the family, toward the children, toward giving more to people that you love around you, and sacrificing most of your needs or dreams or goals. So that's why I ask if you think being a man can be tough, and balancing the
Yeah.
expectations and personal aspirations, and how to navigate this through the life, being uh, you are a husband, a father, a musician, an educator. So again, it goes the thing about the balance.
Yeah. Well, it is. And that I think that life requires um, this full commitment to see it through. We have no choice other than to see through wherever we are, regardless of what choices we
Hmm.
make. You know, it's kind of like we're thrust into this system by virtue of being in a body in time. We're thrust into this situation where, again, I go back to one of the Rush quotes, and they got some really good
Hmm.
ones, but the free will song, if you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice. So we are in a situation where we cannot not decide. We have no ability to stop. Withdrawing from a situation is a choice. Participating, how we participate, how we choose to balance, it's all a choice, and we have no way of really knowing where we're headed, because we don't know the future. And in fact, trying too hard to control the future is also a problem. um
Yeah.
as but what I'm hearing the question you getting at is the peculiar difficulties of trying to be a male in this society, which is, um, on the one, on the one hand, if you're trying to please people, you're going to fail. You know, you're never going to please everybody.
Yeah.
Um, so you got to start with, and this comes back to what I said earlier. I think start with what you find inspiring, because the inspired version of you is going to be the best version of you, and that's going to be the most helpful. Yet that needs to be tempered, because it's not all about you. It's you in this larger context. And so to me, it seems like the path is like this. The external kind of comes in, and we need to focus on the internal, kind of selfishly, to know ourselves. It goes, Socrates says, know thyself. This is, you need to know who you are and what you need. And you need to also learn, what do I need and what do I only prefer? And understanding, because that tells you what's expendable. You know what I mean? How far can I go? How much can I serve without losing
Hmm.
myself? And how? So we have to keep, this is why I journal daily. You have to keep reflecting on where I am and what I'm doing and the reasons I'm doing it for. Most people, I think, don't even know what their motives are. They're a mix of motives, and they don't really even know. Not that any of us can fully know, but as we make efforts to reflect honestly,
Hmm.
we can come to know more of of how we are operating in the world. So I think that by doing that, we can start doing the right things for the right reasons. And then we can increase our ability to be better people. We can become more compassionate and more empathetic to others while also recognizing our own needs. You know, the great in Christianity, of course, you've got the two greatest commandments, you know, what Jesus had to say. He says, love God and love others. I'm going to simplify it. Love others. He says specifically, love your neighbor as yourself. And then he tells a parable of what your neighbor is. And your neighbor is whoever you choose to be neighborly to. And he also says, love your enemies. So your neighbor is everyone. So love
Yeah.
others, which is sometimes very difficult in this world to pull off. But he doesn't say love others more than yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it doesn't say become a doormat as you serve others. He doesn't say to love yourself more than others either. It's the word is as, which is really, really tricky. And I think the only way to get to that is back through the whole consciousness riddle to realize your identity. Because if you start to reach beyond the ego and you go underneath it and you let go of the ego and you
Mm-hmm.
function from this more transpersonal part of recognizing you're just one element in this soup and you don't need your horse to win. You know, you want everybody to win. Now you're looking from a unity perspective. So I think that's the best answer to your question is to look from the unity perspective
Yeah.
of myself and others. What's the best? What's the best outcome? What's the highest outcome? Now, of course, I never know because my perspective is limited from what I can understand. So you always have to have the crack open that says, I don't know the answer. And this, of course, comes back to another element of philosophy, which is all the way back to the story in the Bible, the garden, you know, this Garden of Eden story, which is, you know, you got the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And of course, the
Right.
theoretical fall that they talk about is humans choosing the tree of knowledge of good and evil. What that really is, what is that? Fruit is a common metaphor throughout the entire Bible and fruit means the consequence. So if to eat the fruit means you are believing in your own evaluation of what good and bad is. And of course, a lot of people in Christianity seem to think, therefore, it means that what we have to do is recognize what God has to say. But they don't realize that as they
Mm.
recognize what God has to say, they're interpreting it. So they're really
Yeah.
worshiping
Exactly.
their own understanding of what they think God has to say, which is part of them, not God. So this whole this is the self-referral problem of being in a human body and being a limited perspective. And in the end, then, the best we can do is try to eliminate our blind spots by being fair, honest, unbiased, open minded, recognize what other people want and need, recognize when other people are trying to be dishonest or deceitful, and treat that accordingly. But when other people are
Yeah.
forthright and honest, then we pony up and we be forthright and honest and try to meet in the middle and try to do our best with understanding what we think is best, but also
Mm.
always keeping the crack open to say life is a mystery and I don't know all the answers and I have to be comfortable with ambiguity and uncertainty. So that's from that perspective. Then coming back to be a man, then I have to question things like, what does society claim I should be? Do I agree with that? Because maybe society's wrong.
Right.
You know, I mean, I exist in society, but maybe I could be a change in society. And maybe I could show other people, in this case, we're talking about what it means to be a man. Maybe I could show
Mm-hmm.
other people that the real, in my view, it's not about, I mean, it's about accountability. It's about um, honesty. It's about becoming your best self. And it's about serving others. But the pattern is focus on me first and improve myself, reflect, and then it doesn't stop there. Turn around and express that back out because this is a joint endeavor. We're all on this ball of dirt flying through space together, and we're all part of the whole, and we got
Continuing
to
to the
never lose sight of
endlessness.
it. Yeah. So I guess one more thing I want to say about it. I keep trying to get specific and then I keep going to the bigger picture because the specifics are inside the bigger picture. And if you don't get the bigger picture, the specifics are of limited value, I think. Yeah. And specific, well, I guess specifically, um, yeah, be just everyone's in a different place and we got to each be the best version of ourselves. We have to each do what needs to be done in that situation, and their wisdom requires a subtlety to well, frankly, it requires knowledge beyond my ability, and therefore I have to be open to bigger truths than me, which means, in my view, a spiritual openness
Hmm.
to something bigger than myself to help guide my life, which is surrender, which is what you talked about. You reach that point of something bigger than you. So as I surrender to that, it's a very personal thing, and it's not a one size fits all. And I think that's the problem with stage one religion is that it tends to harden itself and say, no, no, it's
Yeah.
this. This is the answer. And it's like, well, okay, I disagree. And can I interpret that in a way that makes sense for me, unending.
Okay. If you give me in 2 words, what has been the hardest lesson you've had learned in life?
2 words, the hardest lesson. Gosh, I'm not sure how to sum it up, actually, because I'd say the hardest lesson is this current struggle of to persevere or to change direction.
Hmm.
And how do you know? Are you, if you've been beating your head against the wall, a wall for a long, long time, do you
Yeah.
continue to have hope or is that false hope? And so that lesson is really a lesson of how to hold on to equanimity
Yeah.
despite um, despite things that I thought were my purpose. So I thought my purpose was one thing, and I was kind of moving toward it
Yeah.
in life until finally the rug gets pulled out and says, "Oh no, that was actually never your purpose." And because my I never interpreted myself as a teacher. I never interpreted myself as a it wasn't my goal in life to be an author of, stuff.
Hmm.
I just did that because I couldn't do the thing I really wanted to do, you know. So which was just be a musician and just play and perform and write music. So, I did get I mean it kind of kept me close to it, but it's a different thing. And and then the music industry changed. The internet kind of destroyed the music industry,
Yeah.
and then it's like, oh, that thing that I kept kicking into the future ain't going to happen. So there's a surrender to the loss, and that's the hardest thing for me. And I'm not sure. I'm still out. The jury's out on what that lesson really is and how I
Hmm.
interpret it. Because my go-to is is truth. That's kind of this common denominator under everything that I'm searching for. Um, and so I'm still searching for it.
Now, looking back on your career, what are you most proud of? Is there anything you would done differently? And do you have any regrets?
What am I most proud of? Well, honestly, this is kind of something that my wife keeps harping on me about because I'm not really proud of anything. I'm like, because it goes back to the my I'm less attached to the ego than I am to the transpersonal. I'm just here. So what I
Mm-hmm.
do is just a combination of what I've the opportunities given me, and I did the best what I could with what the hand I was
But you
dealt.
have
Some
changed lives. I mean, I know countless of lives that you changed and people that been influenced by you, by your
yeah,
words, by your methods, including myself.
yeah. Well, yeah, I like those give me specific. I appreciate that, and yet at the same time, because it wasn't what I wanted to do,
Mm,
it's like okay, yeah, that's good. I feel like my real potential was never realized. I feel like I lived this much of the potential because of the lack of basically as the opportunities to write came into my life, I moved toward where those opportunities were. And that put me at a kind of a dead end in terms of a bigger music career doing what I wanted to do.
mm-hmm,
Because, and this is connected with your question of uh, where what would you, if you did it again, what would you have done differently? And in terms of the career, what I would have done differently is I wouldn't have moved to the place to take a teaching position in the same town as the music print
mm,
publisher because I didn't know it at the time, but that was, I mean, there were successful bands out of Milwaukee. That's where it was.
yeah.
So I thought, well, it's just a matter of finding the right people. Well, apparently that wasn't my lot in life, and I never found the
Mm-hmm,
right combination of people to create something that could grow out of that into the bigger picture. So what I probably should have done if I wanted to be successful as a recording artist is I would have said, "Thank you very much. I'm going to write this book," and wrote those books and then moved to LA and then just got
mm-hmm.
into the music scene with the biggest number of people doing the thing, you know? And could have then more opportunities might have shown. But who knows? Maybe they didn't. I mean, I have no idea if that would have been better or not. Um, you learn the lessons you learn, and it's up to you to take from them what you think
Yeah.
is significant. So, um, yeah, I don't really know.
In this case, how do you want to be remembered? What legacy do you hope to leave behind you, both for yourself, for your family, for your students, and for the music world in general?
Well, I've never really cared much about legacy because I recognize that what other people see is their choice. It goes back to this comment that was written by a rabbi almost 2,000 years ago in the Talmud who says, and it's been repeated a lot now because it's true. We see the world not as it is, but as we are.
Mm,
We interpret through our lens, through our filters. So I get that. And so therefore, what my legacy is doesn't belong to me. That's what other people are going to decide. Therefore, do I care about? I mean, I don't. I'm not in control of that. Um,
mm,
I'm not. It'll be what it'll be. If other people find my life valuable, then great. I would like to be helpful to other people. Like you said, there are people that have been um, impacted positively by my work. And that gives me a little hope. For example, as we've talked about bigger things than music, um, maybe some of those ideas that I've put into this book will actually find some fertile ground and help people,
Hmm.
in even more in substantial ways. I mean, it's one thing to be able to help somebody, play a song. Um, that doesn't mean a whole lot to me. But as you've kind of suggested, there's a lot more to it than that because, like, I remember once hearing this guy, I heard a story. I got a letter in the 90s from an Italian guitarist who was a pediatric physician. And what he told me was he always wanted to play guitar. And he he was also very depressed though because he was in medical school and he was struggling and he was questioning his own ability to be successful and he was suicidal at at failing at this because he was not doing well enough and it looked hopeless to him at the time. So he took some time off and on a whim he bought the Speed Mechanics book because he had dabbled with playing guitar, even
Hmm.
though it was a sideline for him. And in a course of about a month or two of practice, he started to be able to do things that he thought he'd never be able to do. And that taught him that he might be capable of doing a whole lot more. And with the renewed resurgence of this kind of self confidence, and if I just apply myself, maybe I can. He came back
Yeah.
and he finished school and he did graduate. And he was writing this to tell me he had just graduated and that I had quote unquote saved his life. Okay, that's a story. That's a profound impact. And so I know they're
The
out
person
there.
who gave me the book, the person who handed me your book, had a similar story. He was in deep depression. He was suicidal, and so what he said that because of the discipline that Speed Mechanic had, um, he got kind of like stuck in this discipline. So he would like um, close himself up in a room and he would practice Speed Mechanic from morning to the midnight till he falls asleep. And this discipline give him actually like hope to do different things. To now that he finished, he go and perform. He write. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So yeah, so that's out there. And I guess maybe part of the problem is that I'm disconnected from it because I
Mhm.
never got out and played. Performance puts you in the same room with people.
Yeah.
And I've not done much of that. So what I've done is I sit in my room here in the studio and I do what I do
Hmm.
and then I publish it and then I forget about it, you know, and I don't review what I've done. Um, and so other people find it and use it and everything. And that's great. But I'm off trying to do my thing. And I guess because and I never even did a lot of workshops either. I mean, I'd done some, but I didn't go out and do that. So I think that part of the problem is just the lack of direct connection. There is something lacking in whether I write a book and it goes out there or we even connect on social media. There is
Yeah.
something different about performing in a room or talking in a room person to person that is lost in our technologically driven communication systems. And I think that's part of the problem for me. I think we
Um,
all
oof. If you could ask universe one question and get a certain answer, what would the question be?
okay. My first question is why, and my second question is how. That's
And
yeah, that
um,
sums it up.
what would alien think of humanity if they visited?
Aliens, all right. Um, okay, I have an answer for that. So all the way back into the Vedas and in Indian scriptures,
Hmm.
it's very clear, and this is why I love the Eastern philosophy. It kind of puts everything in a really big,
Yeah.
indisputable kind of view, a holistic view. Um, but one of the core principles is that observer and observed is part of the whole system, and you can't ever really
Hmm.
separate. This is reflected in the comment I just said from the Talmud. We don't see the world as it is, but as we are. So you have the observer and the thing that's being observed. And here in Western mindset, we tend to think that we are separated and there's no appreciation of our blind spots or our filters or anything. We just think that what we're looking at is the way it is. In fact, we're
Right.
recreating reality in each of our heads. It's a mental map. It's not reality that we live in. It's the story in our
Hmm.
head. And failing to understand that, we don't understand the relationship between observer and observed. And everything is that relationship. So the Buddhist concept of emptiness comes into play. And the principle is this: nothing by itself has meaning apart from the observer. So, a good example of that is I might see a pencil, okay, and I have a goat, a pet goat, and he will eat the pencil. He sees food. Is it a
Hmm.
pencil or is it food? Well, it's both, but it's a pencil to me and it's food to him. So
Hmm.
it's empty from its own side. It just exists as this thing, okay, and we bring meaning to it. And this is an important concept, especially as artists, because art is the same way. I create art as a motive to do a certain thing, and somebody else perceives it differently. Which is it?
Hmm.
Well, it's both. It's that thing to that person, it's this thing to me. So the teachings of emptiness come into play also when I would entertain a question like you just asked. What would aliens think? Well, the question is, what aliens and what's their perspective? Because they're going to see in humanity what they bring to their filters. So if they're higher minded, understanding, spiritually evolved entities, they're going to look at us probably and say, wow, these guys are dangerous. Let's keep them in a confined space so they don't infect the rest of the world with their
Yeah.
crazy ideas of separation. On the other hand, if they're malevolent types, they who knows what they're going to see or anything in between. So yeah, I guess it's a question of let's define the aliens. Then we might be able to define an answer to that.
So it goes the same back to the same question. It's like what we love reflects who we are inside in loving. We see parts
That's right.
of our
It,
own
it,
souls. Yeah.
everything circles back to the starting point, and the starting point of what we
Hmm.
presume determines our conclusions. It works in reverse too.
Yeah.
Starting point determines the ending point. It's all the whole universe and consciousness and our own psyches all refer back to ourselves. And the crazy thing is, we're in this shared reality, this shared physical reality, and so what we do affects one another, which is a really weird setup. And I think a lot about that is why the setup the way it is. So
Hmm.
that's what
You will never get the
fascinates
answer.
me. That's why my question is why and what and how. I mean, why
And
first?
how?
Why does reality exist? You know, why do we exist rather than not exist? And how did that happen? And
The how
also,
is the actual
is there a
question,
point?
how it happened.
And is there a
Why and
point?
how? Yeah.
Yes, which is
True.
purpose. What is the meaning? And is there a meaning? Because meaning, so the question of meaning flips around to what I bring to it. But if consciousness is all there is, and then that unified field of consciousness is the ground of being, which we could call God, if that's conscious,
Hmm.
well, then the one nature, the thing about consciousness that is unique is it has a subjective experience
Yeah.
and it's aware of itself. And if the unified field is conscious, therefore it's aware of itself, I think that'd be a good, I'd call that God, you know. And then that perspective, oh, there's, maybe there is a meaning. I mean, here in this domain, we are fond of
But
thinking that
if
meaning
but
is
if it
something that we
were a
create.
unified consciousness with what is so-called God, in that case, I believe we would know what's the purpose and the why and how.
True, because you could talk to the intelligence that
Yeah.
is all that is, and it would know. Maybe it was like, oh, let's just see
Um,
what happens.
if you would tell me a perfect day in your life, a day that looks a day that is your perfect day in life, how would you describe it?
Oh, okay. Um, Synchronistic. So I find myself with the right words in the right place at the right time, and I know that it is part of the bigger plan. Because, sometimes when you have that intuition and your intuition is on the mark and it all kind of works out, I call that,
Mm-hmm.
my own term for that is triangulation, meaning me and the situation and this mystery all seem to be working together. And as it unfolds, the unfolding of the mystery proves that it's actually a synchronicity, not a coincidence. And so the difference between synchronicity and coincidence is two unrelated things that just happen to happen together. Even if they seem related, they're not. They're not causal. And synchronicity says, no, maybe the universe works on the level of meaning. And even
Mm-hmm.
though they are not causally connected, because the universe operates on a level of meaning, there is a purpose to having those things happen together. And you're part of this process and you see the thing. So when I see stuff like that happen, and I have, that's a great day because it inspires me with a sense of connectedness. And as we have this experience of being an integral, connected part
Mm-hmm.
of the whole, this is probably the deepest fulfillment that that I think we can have. We'll never experience fulfillment for the ego. The ego, the individual self that sees it, is trying to win, is never happy, and you're never going to find any real fulfillment there. Which is why we're
Mm-hmm.
happier when we're helping other people, and we seem to have an impact on others because that's our connectivity. So when I see that happen and I see it flow through the day, and it happens without a tremendous amount of effort, there
Mm-hmm.
that flow is that's the perfect day.
I wanted to wrap it up, but yeah, so I wanted to wrap it up, but I want to ask you a question because I'd like to hear your answer. Personal question, which interests me. Do you think world is black and white, like a chessboard, or everything is made of a negative and a positive energy? If you're digging into looking at our planet, we have the plus magnetic field and the negative one. The atoms are made of two. There's always two energies against each other.
Competing.
There's two forces against each other. There's good and
Yeah.
bad. There's God and devil. There's black and white, blue and red. Um, how do you think? What's your vision on it?
Um, so I think I see everything as a unified whole that contains polarities within itself, and and that's what we call duality. That's Maya. That's that
Mm-hmm.
Hindu notion of that. So I think that's pretty well not really disputable in any serious way. So within that, and that's the yin yang symbol. It's the constant flux
Yeah.
of the change, the white and black, and the black and the white, and the white and the black, and um,
Hmm.
so yes, that interplay creates all of the multiplicities, and it's simultaneously true then that in the physical world there is no black without the white and white without the black. It's all a mixture. Okay, so it's not black and white, and yet in the principles you can see that it is, that there are these two competing poles.
Hmm.
And so how it plays out is the balance. Well, again, we go back to that same idea. It shows up again, the balance of paradox of the competing things.
Yeah.
And when it comes to life, I interpret this good and evil thing as being the polarities of that which enhances and sustains life and makes life better, and that which erodes life. Things that enhance life we call good, things that erode life we call evil. And ultimately, you can see that in the end, things then
Hmm.
simplify. There are just those two paths. But the and this comes back to, well, this is articulated in my view very well by Apostle Paul in at the end of the New Testament, some of his letters, um, where he says our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the principalities, the rulers of the world in the spiritual forces. What he's saying is it's your opponent is not this person or that person. It's the principles of good and evil. And as we start to clarify and understand that yes, those things show up in a mixture,
Hmm.
but it's not actually something to be opposed at that level. This comes a great quote. One of the quotes by Einstein that I really like is that a problem is never solved at the level at which it's created. To solve a problem, you have to go to a higher or a deeper level. And
Yeah.
this is the same thing. You're not going to solve the problem by using force in the world to defeat evil. Evil is the methodology of force. You solve the problem by creating good, and you transform your opponents into friends.
Hmm.
So that's how good overcomes evil in this mixture place that we're in. So take that for what it's worth. That's how I'm seeing it right now. In a couple of years, I might see it differently.
I love it. All right. Now, about your upcoming project and book, or albums. Are there any upcoming project, books, albums that you're working on and excited about? What will it include? And about the book that you mentioned, when it's going to be released, and what's the difference? What's the main difference from the previous?
Okay. Well, the book that's coming out end of the month here. Uh, it I'm waiting until let's see what happens with this. Let's see if it creates kind of some kind of momentum that kind of
Mm-hmm.
enables me in the world to follow it up. And if so, I mean, I have lots of ideas. Honestly, I worked on this thing for about 6 years, and it took the publisher 2 years to get it out,
Mm-hmm.
for a variety of reasons. But as I worked on this course, I actually it was originally 180 lessons, and it had about 100 songs in it. And because I didn't have one song per lesson, it felt inconsistent. It worked as a
Yeah.
method, but I was unhappy with that. And I
Mm-hmm.
also came to realize it was just too darn big. It was too much material. So I cut it down from 180 down to 60 lessons, which meant I cut a whole bunch of material out of it, and I have all that material. And I was thinking maybe after this, if this book does well enough, I could follow it up with supplements. That okay, let's take
Mm-hmm.
this section and here's some more. You know, um,
Yeah.
so I have all that. I don't know exactly whether or what it'll be or even, it kind of depends on what happens, I'm not terribly interested in creating a whole bunch of instructional products unless I see that people actually want them, and it makes sense for me to devote time to it.
Hmm.
This I spent so many thousands of hours developing this course that I'm sure I'll probably never make more than minimum wage on it. So um,
It depends how
we'll
we
see.
deliver it.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. And I may follow it up. I don't have any music projects. I do have a singer that I like to work with, and we're just kind of throwing stuff around part time.
Hmm.
It's I haven't honestly I haven't played a guitar, and I mean pick up a guitar in the course of a lesson to demonstrate something, but I haven't played for almost a year, which these sorts of things have happened before. And so if there's a need, if there's a project, um, you know, obviously I'd be in it, and I'd be back to it because I do enjoy playing, obviously. Um, but it takes a lot of work to maintain one's skill set. Um, I mean, if you're not playing, if you're not regularly in a
Yeah.
gigging situation, I mean, that'll maintain your skill set if you just do it. But if you're not doing it, um, then your abilities erode, and they'll come back quick, if I need them. But trying to maintain them for no good reason is just boring to me. You
Yeah.
know, um, I have to be creating something new to be interested in playing.
Well, I
Because it
hope
comes back
after
to the
after this
musician.
conversation, I hope after this conversation you pick up the guitar and do one song for yourself.
Yeah. Well, there is something
So,
coming along. I'm kind of waiting on that singer to come back to me. And the 5 song EP I did 3 years ago,
mhm,
um, that was like all me. I did. I did have the help of 2 singers involved in it, but I actually did most of the
right.
vocal. I did all the writing, I did all the lyrics, I did all the production and everything. Um, this I'm trying to do as a different way. I'm trying to confine my ability or my.
Hmm.
I'm going to throw some ideas at him, and I'll wait till he throws something back at me, and we keep
Hmm.
going back and forth. So it's a real,
Right.
a collaboration. That would be more interesting because that he comes back with something and then I don't have to like figure it all out. I can just sort of like see what inspires me and respond to it.
Yeah.
So that's what we're trying. And so it could be we might have something, but it's kind of moving slow. Um, you know, no need to try to push it. But I appreciate the conversation. I've enjoyed it, and I'm glad
Same
that we could
here.
do that.
And finally, what I would like to ask is if you could go back and give advice to your young self, what would you say?
Well, it depends on the day. Some days I think, "What the hell were you thinking? You should have done something different, I guess. Should have stayed in school and studied astrophysics, which is what I was planning on doing. I don't know because obviously a lot of things have happened in life that I guess you know uh, the problem with all of those things, do this, not that, means not only would it have changed this or that thing, but everything else that came as a result.
Of course.
And there's plenty of things that I'm very thankful about that I have that came out of bad things, and good comes out of bad. And in the end, the most important thing is how we choose to respond to it, which is what determines whether it's ultimately bad or good. It's not what happens, it's how we respond. So, advice, I guess, my advice would be um, don't be so consumed by thinking about outcome. Pay more attention to the moment and enjoy the time that you have. That would probably be my my answer to my younger version.
Hmm.
Yeah. No need to struggle so
Um,
hard.
well, we never know. But what I want to say is that I know from people who I communicate with that so many people got inspired by you, and so many people they're not aware of where you disappeared. So, and there are this very small little uh, mu- musician meetings and meeting points once a year, like NAM show or like Guitar Summit.
Yeah.
Um, these are people that they know you and they're inspired by you and they build a career because of you. So to them and to me, you're like a guitar hero, you're like a father, you're like a teacher, and it's something that we're excited to know, we're excited to see you, we're excited to hear about you. So I believe it just takes few emails and a plane ticket to once a year to Guitar Summit or to NAM to perform, to be in touch with everyone who know you and appreciate you for everything that you did, which it motivates you to do what you love also, I believe.
Well, more connection would probably be helpful. Yeah, because I've kind of been off on my own throughout this. It's writing books is a kind of a lonely experience, you know. Um, but it has its pluses and minuses, and I'm happy to have been able to be useful and have some impact, you know. So I appreciate that, and I thank you for kind of reminding me of that because I need a lot of reminders of that because I'm off
Seriously,
doing my
I
next thing and I
believe,
don't think about it, you know.
yeah. I mean,
So
being next to people who their hobbies and their interests are the same as yours is like I don't know, like when I was a few weeks ago in the Guitar Summit, everyone been like I know everyone, I communicate with everyone through the internet, and when I go back and forth with people from Gibson, with my friends at Marshall, etc., I know they have problems. I know they're depressed. I know they like they're struggling through the life. But that 3 days in Guitar Summit was like you threw a bunch of kids in the candy shop, you know? We were just like all walking around, all talking gears and sound and tone and playing and jamming and drinking. Um, I would really love to see you around both at the Guitar Smith, at the NAM show. NAM is like in 2 months away from now. And I believe it's a perfect place to just come to meet people who uh, man, you don't know the impact you do on this world, and I really hope you understand the value that you brought to so many people and their life.
okay, well, maybe we can maybe I get that worked out. I'll give it a shot.
All right,
Okay. I
now
appreciate
as we wrap up this incredible conversation, I just want to take this moment. Thank you, Troy, for being such a monumental influence, not only in my life but in the life of countless guitarists around the world. Your mastery, your dedication to teaching, to music, and your ability to inspire hope in those who dream of greatness is unmatched. You've not only taught us how to play guitar, but you've also shown us how to navigate life with passion at our hearts. You've been a true mentor, an incredible father figure, and above all, an extraordinary human being. It's been an honor to share this space with you today. Thank you for your wisdom and for this amazing conversation.
Wow, I'm quite honored to hear all that. But thank you, Aryan, and for what you do. And let's just keep moving ahead and trying to make this world a better place. I think. But
Sure,
I very
let's
much
do it.
appreciate all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you, and I appreciate to have you.
My pleasure.